Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday Show. It's the Sunday Show. It's the Easter Sunday Show. Woo! I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me today, Austin Archer. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. I'm not in my normal spot. I'm out of town, but I'm happy to be here. I'm in a comfy chair.
Well, we have loads of questions. By the way, this is one of many call-in shows here on the Line Network, and we get it. It's Easter Sunday, so the likelihood that anybody's going to call in and defend the resurrection is, laughably small, because while we're aware of the contradictions in the various gospel accounts, most of the people who went to church services this morning are absolutely not aware of those things. And while we're aware of how to apply skepticism and critical thinking to evaluate whether or not there's sufficient evidence to believe that God created a human-ish copy of itself and came down here to die and be resurrected to act as a loophole for rules that he's in charge of, that there's not sufficient evidence to believe any of those things. And saying, oh, but there's an empty tomb. Really? I got a hole out in my backyard I could call an empty tomb too, but I don't think there's any evidence that Jesus was out there. I don't think that there's any evidence. And by the way, an empty tomb, like I've got a dog now, and there's a cat buried underneath that tree that died probably 10 years ago. And if the dog digs up that cat, I will have a proper empty tomb in my backyard.
Yeah, I'm also more concerned about the part of the Bible that talks about how there was a bunny in that tomb with him that laid eggs, apparently.
Yeah.
And I'm worried. I'm like, where do they get that too? Because I've never seen a bunny lay eggs, but apparently this one in the tomb did.
That's always confused me. I mean,
I know.
Did the bunny lay the egg, or did Jesus lay the eggs? And how many eggs did the women find in the tomb? And how many women were there to find those eggs?
And did he hide them from them deliberately? Did they have treats inside of them?
Yeah. Were they painted, or is that something that we invented to kind of, in the same way that the cross that people use probably doesn't look incredibly accurate to a lot of crucifixion crosses. We splice things up.
Yeah.
Splice and spice, he said sloppily. I can trumpet. By the way, we saw today's message from Dear Leader. When I woke up this morning, a bunch of people had already shared it. I shared it. I think it's past time to invoke the 25th Amendment, but this one is genuinely true. President Trump today said, Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. This is the leader of the United States with his Easter sermon, mocking Muslims, calling out Iran, because the Strait of Hormuz will open naturally itself. And we don't need help, but we do need help. And Iran better get on it because nobody else is helping. And if they don't do it, then we're going to start bombing bridges and power plants. Well, happy Easter to you too, Mr. President.
It's been 10 years of this political era, but I still regularly somehow I manage to be kind of flabbergasted still. It's still like, because you read that and I thought, oh, is that that's fake, right? He didn't actually say that. And then I was like, no, remember who we're talking about. It just always seems so impossible that that could be a real thing.
It's the wildest thing because it's always surprising and unbelievable, and yet completely unsurprising and completely believable. Every single time I see somebody post, I'm like, that can't be real. And in the back of my head, I'm like, it's absolutely real. You already know when you go look this up, it's absolutely going to be real. And then I go look it up because I'm not going to be the guy that posts the lie. But
right. I mean, as you were reading that, I thought, oh, this is a joke one. It was the praise be to Allah that really kind of threw me. I was like, wait, okay. But it's just him using Easter Sunday as a way to sort of, I guess, just just taunt the people that he's bombing right now. What a
I wish we had the rights to actually use it. There's a song called "Who Would Jesus Bomb." I've read the lyrics to it before, and obviously I'm not on Jesus's side, but
yeah.
if you are on Jesus's side and if you think the resurrection happened, 720-619-2288, or there's a link in the description down below where you can call in and get started defending this. And it's wild because, there's a number of questions you can ask yourself about the Easter account. And that is, how many women went to the tomb? When did they go to the tomb? What did they see? What was said? Did Jesus appear to the women? Or, some, all, none, whatever. Which disciples went to the tomb? Did the disciples believe the reports? How many disciples did Jesus appear to? Where were the disciples told to go? I'm just reading from one of, I don't know, a billion charts that point out the contradictions in the Easter story, because you have the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which, by the way, we don't have original copies of. We don't necessarily know who wrote them. They're definitely not written by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, although John may have been written by a John. Then there's also one quick mention in Corinthians and a little bit of reference in Acts. And this is the sum total of the evidence that Jesus ever existed, that he was ever crucified, and for the remarkable claim that he was resurrected. That's it. A handful of pages in the first couple of collected works, no empirical evidence. What do they keep pointing? What's the single most common thing that Christians point to when you ask them, demonstrate the resurrection happened?
The Shroud of Turin? I don't know.
The empty tomb.
Oh, the empty tomb.
Wow. The shroud gets some press on occasion, but it's already demonstrated to be a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, how do you tell? How do you tell that, oh, hey, look, we found an empty tomb. Cool. Was it Jesus's? Which they can't verify. And let's imagine they could verify that it was Jesus's tomb. Cool. Then we confirmed that Jesus lived and was buried. It's empty now.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not still going to be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it is wild. And this is not just what people bank a bet on for the eternal disposition of their supposed soul that we don't think they have. It instructs how they live their life. Some bizarre, contradictory accounts of a magical story, and you get a holiday out of it that, by the way, is, if it weren't for the whole eggs and the candy and the Easter bunny, nobody would give the slightest crap about Easter. By the way, nobody would or should care about Christmas if they hadn't co-opted all the fun stuff.
I was just about to say that same thing. I was like, everybody celebrates Christmas, but most people don't do it because they give a shit about Jesus.
Yeah. And the demonstration that the overwhelming majority of people who identify as Christian are frauds in some regard is that Christmas is the important one for celebration, but Easter is the only one that actually matters. Like, if you go in and read Paul, if Christ be not raised, then our faith is in vain. The resurrection is the only thing that matters, not the birth, which is also a wild narrative with competing genealogies and magical stars and wise men and gifts, and it's a manger, and none of it has been demonstrated or could be demonstrated. And it's not even done at the right time. The things about the census, and
yeah,
I don't understand. Like, I used to believe this stuff, but I believed it because, oh, this is what my parents believe, and my pastors taught me this, and they told me there was good reason to believe and that there was evidence for it. And then as long as you're already kind of in that vein, then you read the affirming things, the people who, by the way, couldn't debate their way out of a wet, hot paper bag, um, like McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, or Lee Strobel's The Case for the Creator, The Case for Christ. And these are people pretending to be skeptics and pretending to be rational thinkers, putting together a compelling narrative of bits and pieces of information and misinformation all glommed together in one pile. So you've
Yeah,
got your options, Christians. By the way, if you're not a Christian, why haven't you called in yet? I mean, I know you're not going to defend the resurrection, but you believe some other God, right? Something else, some theistic claim.
save our souls today. It is so interesting culturally how these holidays have taken on, a personality of their own. And of course, every Christmas you get Christians really, really insisting on remember the reason for the season. Nobody says that at Easter. They're like, hey, I know there's a lot of fun and games going around here with these eggs, but don't forget the reason for the season. Like I know they talk about it at church, but they don't like get all weird and there's no news stories on Fox News about the war on Easter and how secular society is trying to erase Christ from Easter, you know. But every single year we got to hear about that with Christmas. We got to hear about how no one dares to say Merry Christmas, even though I don't know a single person alive who gives a shit about saying Merry Christmas.
It's wild.
But it's also like the cultural identity of these holidays that Christmas has this entire movie genre with hundreds of films that are produced all the time. And I mean, is there a single Easter movie? It's crazy the size of and seeming importance placed on both of these holidays. And you're right. You would think it would be inverse. You would think it would be the holiday celebrating the resurrection. It would
Yeah.
be.
And I know some Christians, by the way, there are Christian denominations that do not celebrate any of this stuff, because they view the celebrations as sacrilegious, and including Christmas. And then there are some that are like, we don't celebrate Christmas. That is a syncretic mix of Christianity and paganism and all kinds of stuff that isn't relevant. Um, we do celebrate Easter, but we don't do the bunny or the eggs or the candies or anything else. We're just there to, we go to church. Awesome. By the way, congratulations to just an absolute truckload of Christians who went to church for the first time this year. And when we get around to Christmas, I'm sure you'll go for the last time this year. Uh, and you guys are the ones that definitely should be calling in, because one, it's very clear you don't know a thing about your religion and don't really care about it, which makes for really funny attempts at defending why on earth you bothered to do it, when we all know that you Easter Christmas Christians are just putting on a show for families. It's 100% performative. If you don't show up at Easter, your mom's going to be mad at you. If you don't go to the midnight mass, mom's going to be mad at you. You won't get as good of a present. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's so weird how many people in the world, especially because the way I grew up very devout, and it was sort of kind of it was like you got to give everything you're capable of giving to this thing, knowing that you're going to fall short, knowing that everyone is a sinner, knowing that everyone is going to require forgiveness and going to need to go through a process of repentance. But it was the expectation was you're here every single week and you're giving everything you possibly can to this thing. Not only did I go to church every Sunday, but I went to uh I went to seminary 5 days a week at school, and then I also had mutual activities with the young men and young women in my church on Wednesday evenings, and I had the Boy Scouts program, and we had family home evening on Monday nights, and it was a very big, commitment of time every week of your life. And it still to this day kind of perplexes me, people who are just who if you ask them, are you Christian, do you believe in that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and also God made flesh and resurrected and all that, and they're like, oh, 100%, I totally believe that that's true, but they go to church once a year, and it's just kind of like you said, because their mom would be mad at them if they didn't. And it's like, well, what, so you fully believe in this story. You've never bothered to examine the veracity of any of these stories. But as far as your personal life is concerned, it's like it barely is a blip on how you live your day-to-day life. It doesn't really inform any of your day-to-day decisions.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's something. While we're waiting on theists to call in, which let's be honest, I wouldn't expect it. Uh, so I'm a former believer. Austin's a former believer. Most of the people that I run into who are atheist activists, secularists, skeptical activists on behalf of religion, are former believers. There are a few that have been, I've worked with a number of lifelong and I'm a third generation atheist. Awesome. I'm glad you managed to escape it. I'm often asked, when was the moment that I realized um, Christianity was unbelievable and undeserving of respect, attention, or definitely devotion and worship. And I, I always struggle because there wasn't a moment. It's not like I had an epiphany. Um, it was a moment followed by a moment followed by a moment where I just wait a minute. I thought this. Wait a minute. I thought this. Um, and the wall started crumbling and the dominoes went. But I hear from people on occasion who are like, I remember the exact moment. I remember exactly what happened. I remember, where I was sitting. Here's what was said, and it flipped a switch in my brain, and I was just, done with belief. If you're that somebody, if you're out there watching right now, and and can succinctly describe the event and or argument and or failed argument that tipped you over the edge, go ahead and call in 720-619-2288 or the link down below in the description, because the odds are good we're not going to hear from too many theists today. And I'm going to say, hey, if you're out there and you're one of our regular viewers or a fan, or you don't get to talk about this stuff very often, but yes, I definitely had that moment. Call in with that. If your moment was being born, okay, congrats on being a lifelong atheist, but I don't know that that's going to help us much.
My story's more similar to yours too, Matt. Like, because people do like to ask that question, what was the moment? And I sort of have a loose moment where I remember the moment that I thought, oh, I might be an atheist. But it was after, as you said, a series of, oh, I don't actually think that happened. Or I guess that didn't happen the way I thought it was, or, and these things sort of falling away one at a time. And I remember walking around in a grocery store one day and being like, oh, maybe I just don't actually believe any of this. Maybe that, like, enough of these pieces have fallen away and been chipped away that maybe it's okay for me to just say, I don't actually think it was like once I realized that my church's, doctrines and God myths and stories were most likely fabricated, I just kind of went, oh, but that's why all of the different churches sound so similar. They're all doing the same thing. And then that was like the last thing to going, oh, I guess I just don't actually believe that God is real. Uh, but it was a slow process of one after another after another. So,
I saw a message from Arden. I haven't been able to watch chat, so
oh yeah.
maybe I will interact with chat a little bit more, but evidently Andrew Wilson was in chat.
Well, I don't know that it was Andrew Wilson, but
Oh, I do.
some yes, he got very upset.
No, that was the joke. You can tell the story. I thought you were going to be busy on the call screen thing. Tell the story, and everyone will know exactly why I'm convinced it's Andrew.
Okay, well, so somebody was in chat being like, "Oh, careful how you speak on Jesus' name," and I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna slander Jesus' name." And then somebody else said that the emptiness of the tomb was proof, and I said, "Empty like Jesus's cloaca after laying all those eggs." And then he flamed out and said, what was it here? I'll pray for you as if there's no other way. There's no way to get Jesus followers to call in. If you want people triggered calling in, no human can lay eggs like no man can give birth. So I was like, you really can't stop thinking about trans people for more than 5 seconds, can you? Go back to
It
your
is,
little porn cave.
yeah, so this is the thing. For those who don't know, Andrew Wilson is a losing debater who doesn't understand the basics of philosophy, doesn't understand that a dilemma and a trilemma are different, and that you can't ask, is it true? Because that's not, hey, I have an orange here. Yeah, but is your orange true? Okay, thank you for showing you're no longer on the same planet. But I walked out of a debate with Andrew because we were supposed to be doing a debate of competing worldviews, secular humanism versus a biblical view of morality. And Andrew, in his opening, decided to mock trans suicide, engage in some other dishonesty, and then agreed to concede my point on the debate if I could just answer the one question of how a man could get pregnant. And I walked out of that debate because first of all, Modern Day Debates is a garbage organization that will platform any dipshit basement dwelling lunatic with flat earth stuff and whatever. It's all about clicks and sensationalizing. So, good for them. I'm sorry I helped build it, or contribute to it. But I posted a video afterwards about why I walked out. And I also pointed out that, I don't consider debates winning, but that's a win if somebody agrees they're going to concede the point. And I also demonstrated easily that a man can, in fact, get pregnant. I think his thing was, can a man get pregnant? Not can a man give birth, but I went with pregnant, which is easy. And since then, and that's been, I don't know, honey, is it like 3.5 years, 4 years, something like that? I don't know. But
Sorry, I got to screening, so I missed whatever you were asking.
okay.
Oh, but yeah,
It was several years ago, and despite that, and despite the fact that Andrew Wilson keeps getting defeated in debates by Christian women, can't open a jar, he seems to have a massive fan network, because every time I put up a video, somebody comes over and says something about men can't get pregnant, or you ran from Andrew, or whatever else. And I've gotten to the point now where my response is just, thank you for your attention to this matter. And I just do capital MATT-ER, because they're just giving me engagement. But the reality is, when I go look at these accounts, they're all like 13-year-old accounts with 2 subscribers. So this is a bunch. He buys, I'm going to guess, or somebody on his behalf buys a bunch of dead accounts as his little bot farm. So when I see somebody come in chat doing the men can't get pregnant, I'm just like, hi, Andrew. Happy Easter. Because trans men, some of them absolutely can get pregnant. Oh, but trans men aren't men. So now we're going to have the real discussion, which is about how we're going to classify people, and is there a distinction between gender and sex and all that stuff. And so this is all you have to know. I mean, by all means, tune into the Transatlantic Call-In Show and get better educated. But all you have to know is all of the arguments against trans folks are just flat out denials that there is any cis-trans differentiation, and is merely making flawed definitions based on oversimplifications. And it's all derived, I think, from homophobia. Some dudes figured out, oh my God, she's so hot, I'm getting so excited. Wait, she has a penis? Oh, no. I must fight against that for fear that I might find out I like things I didn't know I liked. Who the hell knows? But it's hilarious that I can put up videos, 4 videos a month on my personal channel, and immediately Andrew or his bot army, or whatever fan is running his bot army, will come in to talk about how men can't get pregnant. Yes, they can. And you can ask Dr. Ben about it too.
it's just I've been thinking about this because we have astronauts in space right now, and of course, whenever that happens, the dumbest people alive have to come out of the woodwork to tell us about how space isn't real, and how they couldn't go through the firmament, and how NASA is photoshopping photos of Earth to trick us for some reason. But it's the highlighting of Dunning-Kruger. It's the same thing with this debate over biological reality and science. it's just so crazy to me how many people can't accept the idea that there are topics that they just don't know that much about. It's just like that it shouldn't, it really shouldn't be a crazy proposition to be like, hey, if you've never studied astrophysics or rocket science in any serious academic capacity, it's okay if you don't understand how this stuff works like fully. It's I don't understand how I couldn't explain to you how to build a rocket, and I can't really explain to you all of the mechanics of space exploration, but I understand that there are people who can. And it's the same thing with like human biology, where people think that they are biology experts, and
Yep.
the first thing out of their mouth is is well, obviously there are two chromosomal orientations, XX and XY, and you're like, cool. You shouldn't be talking about this publicly. You are not ready to have a public conversation on this, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't need to know everything about everything, but what you should just be able to say is, there's some things I know stuff about, and there's some things I don't. But what Dunning-Kruger does for people is it just makes them go, I can't conceive of a world where there's a topic that I don't know, that I'm not one of the world's foremost authorities on.
Yep.
So even if I have no reason to think I would be one of the world's foremost authorities on that topic, I'm going to behave as though I am with all of the smugness and confidence. It's insane.
We've got some callers calling in with the responding to the moments that they knew they were an atheist or
Yeah.
were no longer a believer. But just to touch on this topic, so for those who don't know, in addition to all the stuff I do here and the magic shows and other stuff, Arden and I run Epic Loot Exotics, and we breed reptiles. In fact, we have either 20 or 21 species of snakes. And I think we're down to 9 species of lizards. And so we breed them. And it's a lot of fun, and it's interesting both with regard to the genetics and the process. Well, within ball pythons, there's a morph that's called spider, and it got a really bad reputation because the spider morph occasionally causes a head wobble. And so for years, people identified it and said, oh, it's a neurological condition. And that makes sense. I mean, if you're not actually a scientist or a researcher and you're just going off of, oh, here's the symptom, that looks like a neurological issue. It looks like, like Parkinson's or something along those lines in the wobbly. And so you just go with that. Well, as it turns out, it is probably a defect with the inner ear that is impacting balance. And we can't say for sure yet, but that we do know that the spider gene morph comes with a defect in the inner ear, and it's more reasonable to infer that this can cause balance issues rather than there's also some neurological issue with it. And so we posted that and we shared it. And it's taken a while to get the information out to correct some of the breeders who still, oh, it's a neurological. It may be. You don't know that. Well, I was engaged in some discussion about this gene the other day, and a gentleman comes in and goes, snakes don't have ears. And I was like, somebody else chimed in and posted a link to the actual study and said, they don't have external ear openings, but they definitely have ears. They have inner ears. And he's like, nope, they hear with their jawbone. Yes, the jawbone feeds a different range of vibrations, but it feeds them to the inner ear. And I'm like, this is basic biology. You could have looked at the study we linked you to. You could have looked and done a quick Google search, but instead, this person just kept doubling down on, I'm right, I'm a breeder, snakes don't have inner ears. And eventually, when everybody dogpiled on them, it wasn't, okay, I was wrong. Getting corrections is always going to be difficult. I'm telling this story so you guys know it's not just the theistic community. Dunning-Kruger is everywhere. And so no apology, no correction. What he said was, well, English essentially isn't my first language, so this is just me misunderstanding. And I was like, I didn't say it, but what I wanted to say was, you know what I don't do? I don't go find posts in languages I barely understand and then repeatedly correct them on something that I'm the one that's probably wrong about. I don't do that.
That'd be so funny finding a forum of people speaking Spanish and being like, I took some Spanish in high school, and then getting in like a heated argument with them about how you're really right about something, and then
Yeah,
eventually just going, all right, guys, I'm going to be honest. I don't really speak Spanish very well, so I think I just misunderstood what we were talking about.
it's absolutely wild. But all right, so we've got callers calling in. If you're a theist and you want to actually defend the resurrection, you want to defend your God, whatever, by all means, we are looking for theist callers, that's for sure. But in the meantime, we've got some atheist callers, and we're going to start here with Matt, Matt's pronouns are he, him from California. So Matt, tell us about the moment you knew that you were an atheist.
Yeah, hey guys, Matt, Austin. So yeah, just for a little preface, I'm 27. I've been an atheist for probably around 13 or so years now. So I kind of figured this out when I was first starting high school. I spent a really long time, probably like the first half of my life, which to you guys, I guess, might not be that long, but I spent about the first half of my life sort of as like a fundamentalist. I was raised in a very strict, like literalist interpretation of the Bible. And
Yeah.
when I started learning about evolution, specifically the evolution of humans in around sixth grade in my history class, we had this project where we had to go through the different species of hominins that came before us. And when my mom found out about this, she was absolutely livid. And she went to the teacher and had a conference because I didn't do the assignment. And the teacher sat her down right in front of me and said, well, I'm sorry, but evolution is a fact. This is demonstrable. This is how we came about. And my mom didn't really have a real response. It was just a lot of sort of flailing, that sort of thing. And that was the first time I ever saw my mom, fail at something. And that sort of planted a seed in my head of kind of doubt. And from then I went to start researching like dinosaurs and the age of the earth and fell into apologetics. And eventually came to a point where I realized that Christianity probably wasn't true just because of the major contradictions. And about the time I was in ninth grade, I had a friend who was raised as an atheist, and I would constantly talk about these sorts of things. And one day he kind of just said, "Hey, Matt, you don't actually have to believe in a God. That's not something that you have to do." And it sort of right there just clicked for me. I just like, well, I never really considered that fact. That makes a lot of sense, and from then on, I kind of never looked back.
Yeah.
Always very impressed with people who are, and also kind of jealous of people who are able to figure it out younger. I'm always like,
Yeah.
oh, I think you saved yourself a few more years of trauma by being able to recognize that. But I would even say that the story you're telling, I've been thinking a lot about Dunning-Kruger lately because of the responses to the Artemis 2 mission. But I would say that one thing that sticks out in that story is your ability to just recognize, oh, I kind of trusted that my mom was a trustworthy source for information and truth, and she seems kind of flummoxed by this question. And you don't necessarily need to go, oh, well, I'm going to go out and figure everything out and learn what all this stuff is, but just understanding like, oh, like there's just a lot of topics that a lot of people don't know everything about. And when people pretend that they do, like if you said you got into apologetics, and looking at apologetics and being able to recognize, oh, these people are flailing too, like my mom was.
Mm-hmm.
These people are coming up with like really lazy, bad rationalizations for things that, and their explanations are like kind of like silly. And you don't necessarily need to then become an expert in anthropology or archaeology or paleontology or any of these things to understand that what the apologetists are doing is just I guess bad science, but not really science at all. It's just people sort of filling in the gaps in their knowledge with just sort of babble. I think just understanding that I get accused of being a know-it-all all the time on my channels where people are like, oh, you think you're just right about everything. And I'm like, oh, let me correct you on that. I'm actually kind of dumb. I'm actually like in the circles that I run in, like I'm not a very smart guy at all. I even the things that I know a lot about, I know that there are other people who know a lot more about me than those people. The thing that makes me somewhat of a trustworthy source is that I am decently self-aware, I am reasonably well-spoken, and I am aware of where my deficiencies lie in topics that I don't know everything like know enough about. And just being aware that there are just people who are smarter than me about things and who know more than me about things is it's an important part of the journey that you just described, I think. You know, just being like, oh, okay, cool.
So just to sum up, Matt, because we've got a bunch of people calling in to kind of share their moments. Yours came down to, in some sense, a conflict over evolution versus creationism, but seems to mostly be about recognizing that your mom was likely wrong, and that I opened your eyes to the possibility that they might have been wrong about other things, and then somebody gave you permission to not believe.
Yeah, I think more or less that pretty much sums it up. I just never really considered the possibility that there wasn't some sort of God or something like that. And just to touch on what Austin said a little bit, around this same time, I started getting into philosophy as well. And I saw it was attributed to Confucius. I don't know if he actually said this, but he said, true intelligence is knowing the limit of one's own knowledge. And I think that kind of really spoke to me and led me to a place where I became just ultimately curious and started searching.
Yep. I hear you. I will say,
hey, I appreciate your guys' time today. I guess I'll let you get to the other callers unless you have anything else you want to say to me.
No, just say thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one.
Impressive.
I like people named Matt.
I met another Austin last night, and I kept making jokes about how I just kept making Austin jokes all night long.
You know what you need for next year's mug?
What's that?
You need a mug that says Matt lives in me, because I live in Austin.
That's true. That's good.
All right. Here we go. We got other atheists calling in to share their moments as well. We're just going to take them in order. Rivka, she here from New York, calling in to share her story. Thank you so much, Rivka. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. Just anxious as I always am. But I'm calling it because my my I guess my number one atheist moment was the big thing that made me like completely lose faith was well, I grew up sort of liberal Jewish, and I grew up with a very like uh a very like I grew up with both like science and religion, and being told that these things can go together, and being told that these things were like completely compatible, and that there was that the Bible was metaphorical and things like that. And you know, I was technically conservative Jewish, which is like reform with the trappings of Orthodox, some of the trappings anyway. And I when I came out as trans in my 30s, well, before this, I should say, in my late 20s. Before this, I should say that I wavered back and forth on atheism and religion throughout most of my life. Because when I would learn about science and religion, it was hard for me to like make these things like cohere. And
Sure.
when So, but until about 10 years ago, whenever I would like have these really bad panic attacks, I would think I was dying, and I would say the Shema, the Jewish prayer for when you wake up, when you go to bed, and before you die, among other things. And you know, so until then, I was basically a theist until about 10 years ago, when I came out as trans, and I my family like it really surprised me, but my family completely rejected me at the time. I was told to change my last name. I was told to that my dad told me he wanted no part of my life at the time, and I was on disability, and I when I but I went and I tried to find a job out in DC, and I found one, and but then I ended up going to the psych ward, and I lost the job, and
Hey,
I
Riv,
yes,
we're
what is
wandering
it?
a little bit. I can't.
Yeah, I'm
I've got a
trying
whole
to
bunch of people on
I'm
hold, so we
trying to
can't
give the
quite do
background.
an entire life story. But I don't want to. I don't want to undercut.
I'm
You
just
know.
trying to give the small there's a lot more to this, but I'm trying to give like as little as I can. The
Yep.
point is I ended up homeless. And when I was at an AA meeting, after being up for days, and I was in this AA meeting sitting there listening to everyone talk about how God got them sober, God got them this, God got them that, and at that moment it just seemed to me like I just couldn't it's just like I just completely lost any belief. I just felt like God is doing that for these people. Why isn't he doing something for, you know, why isn't he doing something for poor people? Why isn't he
Yep.
doing something for people throughout the world who are suffering and things like that? If he can get you sober, why isn't he doing all this other stuff?
Yeah.
And that was basically, I haven't believed in God since then.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't said the Shema. Even when I'm having the panic attacks, I'll just I won't say the Shema. I'll think about it and I'll say no, I'm not going to say it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is.
I'm
Go ahead,
I
Austin.
just wanted to express sympathy for, just the story that you had with your family. I just think it's so wild how, people get their moral framework from their religious worldview, and then the second that one of their children is experiencing something that goes outside of that their sort of framework for understanding knowledge and truth in the world doesn't account for, that it just, there's no space for, like, oh, we don't know how to account for gender diversity because it's not in this fucking book, so we don't know what to do with
Exactly.
that, even though there's so much evidence of it it's just like, well, it's in the world, look around you, it's not in that book but it's in lots of other books, but because it's not in that one book they don't know how to account for it, and they just turn so instantly kind of unthinkably, unfathomably cruel. Yeah, I also I just wanted to really quickly say that I've spent a lot of time in those same rooms that you were in, where you
Yeah.
realize that God isn't real, and it's it it's very fascinating. I've been going to those rooms for about 7 years, and I'm an avowed atheist, and I know lots of atheists who go to those rooms with me. And it was one of my primary fears when I first started going in there. As I said, I got to let you guys know I don't believe in God, and I don't think you're going to be able to convince me to believe in God. And they all said that's fine. And I said, I think you guys are gonna pull the rug at some point and go like, no, you got to believe in God to be here. And they were like, no, like you can do whatever you want, just like show up here. And I think that at the end of the day, like, people are able to get sober and find recovery through through a large part, like, efforts of their own. Obviously, having help from a community is fantastic. Having supportive friends and family, finding people who have done it before, who have walked the path before you, to
Yeah.
help, is fantastic. And if you want to call that God, if you want to put that in the place of that word, sure, whatever. But there's all kinds of things in there that bother me, that I'm sure you've noticed too. Like, even you were saying, if God can do this for these people, why can't he do it for me? And it's like, I bucket that all the time. I'm just like, what is with the gendered language around this concept? That, like,
Sure.
my understanding of it now from a recovery perspective is like, it's such a loose concept. Why is everyone still so insistent on it being this guy? And it's always with the capital H he, capital H him. And boy, I notice it all the goddamn time in there. And it's like, well, Bill Wilson was a Christian from the 1930s. It makes sense why he would use language that would be reflective of some kind of Christian theology. But it's just interesting the way that people will say, yeah, you can have your own understanding of this, but then also use this gendered language that's like, why the hell would this thing that we're talking about that none of us actually understand? It's fine if you want to call it a him, you can call it that, but why is the official language gendered? There's just so much, silliness around it. And I'm sitting here as living proof that like you don't actually have to believe in a guy who created the universe and answers prayers to find lasting recovery from addiction. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Yeah.
There's definitely something about those rooms that about the ability to socialize with people who aren't doing drugs or drinking, and something about the ability to go there and just have a good time, like without recovery. I mean, without drugs. That's something
Yeah.
I kind of miss about those rooms. But I read a book, Alcoholics Anonymous: Culture Cure by Charles Booth. And it was there's two addictions, and it was like the message behind it is basically like he explores it, and he explores it very critically. But he also talks about the good parts of it, the good aspects of it. And it but the second edition is more critical than the first edition, as he learns more about the rooms and gets a better perspective. But it's I don't know. I found it really helpful. Like I still try to I was just thinking about going to an LGBT meeting later today that I don't go to very often. I'm visiting my parents in Ohio. I'm from Niagara Falls, but I'm visiting my parents in Ohio. There's an LGBT meeting here that that I went to like last year, and everyone was talking about Suboxone and talking about how they don't think Suboxone, they don't how they need to be like tolerant with people who are on Suboxone, but they can't condone it, or they can't say that people are clean if they're on Suboxone and things like that. And it's that
If
kind of
they're
thing
on
that just
what?
makes me think, this is a medical problem. It's a medical issue. There's people who there's people who their next hit could kill them.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I
but
think it's
I know,
my personal. I have personal opinions on that I just feel like nobody should be making somebody else's program their prerogative. Like it's just like, hey, if somebody
yeah,
needs to take Prozac or lithium or whatever and that helps them get by, that helps them stay relatively stable on a day-to-day basis. Because there's the people that are like, oh, it's nothing, absolutely nothing, no help from any outside chemical, and it's like, shut the fuck up. Like, if that's what
yeah,
works for you, that's fine, cool. Like,
yes, evidence-based treatment. It's
yeah,
extremely extremely
yeah.
effective at keeping people from overdosing, at keeping people
Yeah, and I'll say
um,
I early
so
on
I don't think
I used
everyone,
to I was just gonna say early on I used to go to queer meetings all the time because I felt safer at those meetings. I felt like the people in
yeah,
those meetings were more secular minded anyway. And my whole experience, I have a hard time with like stag meetings that are just men because I don't know. I feel just as uncomfortable in a room full of men as a lot of people do. Men are scary.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks,
All right.
Rivka.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Well,
sharing.
all right. Thank you. All right.
Take care.
Uh,
Have fun visiting the fam, or as much fun as you can.
I was gonna say somebody in the chat talked about how the obviously the using he him and the capitalizing he him and all, it's obviously rooted in misogyny. It's obviously rooted in a patriarchal framework of the world. Like these people wanted to build a framework that prioritizes men as the figureheads of society. But I was going to fold that into what you said earlier, Matt, about how this kind of misunderstanding of gender diversity is rooted in so much homophobia, and it is, but misogyny is also a big part of that too. It's the reason why trans women tend to get more flack than trans men, because there's something about from cis women and cis men, there's something about this, like why would you cast off the privilege of being born a man to to condescend down into a lower social status? There's something about like the prioritization of having the privilege of being a man and then be in the dominion yeah, there's a lot of misogyny baked into it,
Yeah,
that yeah.
it's wild. So, as a reminder, this is the Sunday show, and it's if you're out there and you're a believer of some religion, if you have some defense of your God, if you're a Christian and you're willing to actually defend the resurrection, or if you think Jesus actually laid those eggs, or maybe it was the bunny that they buried with Jesus, because I've heard that the bunny died or the rabbit died. I don't know what that means, but I think it might be tied to Easter. I don't know. But the lines are open for you to call in and defend any of the religious beliefs. And in the meantime, because evidently people are so busy giving praise to the Most High that they cannot do their job under 1 Peter 3:15, or because they already know there are so many contradictions in the resurrection accounts, and they have nothing to point to other than anonymous, unsigned copies of translations of copies of oral traditions, that they decided to just give us the day off, and admit failure, that they do not have any good reason to believe what they're saying they believe. And if that's the case, then in the meantime, we're going to fill in with atheist after atheist explaining briefly, maybe a little extended on occasion, explaining what was the tipping point for them. Because people find their way out of religions for different reasons, in different ways, at different times. It's not all about, I sat down and evaluated the cosmological arguments for the existence of God, and I found them fallacious. And then I went on to discover and investigate the moral arguments, and I found them just bald assertions. And then I went on to this one and this one and this one. And finally, my purely rigorous intellectual pursuit led me to the conclusion that I cannot have evidential warrant to believe in some sort of God. No, the reality is, and this is why, people be like, oh, who hurt you? Or, so sorry for whatever the church did to you. I never had a bad experience. My pursuit was almost entirely just, hey, is there a good reason for this? But other people, it's the problem of suffering, the argument from divine hiddenness. It's finding out, hey, not everybody believes this, or the evidence that people are citing isn't as justified. Or, I got some people, it's okay if you left religion because you wanted to sin and you were pissed off at God, and that freed you up to eventually realize, hang on a minute, there doesn't seem to be a God watching or caring at all. And the most anybody can do is be like, oh, he's watching. He's going to wait and get you after you're dead. Cool. After I'm dead, he can do whatever the fuck he wants to me. People find their way out for all kinds of different reasons, and they don't necessarily have to be good reasons. But if you find your way out, unless you're wrong, which nobody's been able to demonstrate, I don't know that it's a bad reason. It was the thing that helped you get free. So we'll keep going with that. Jenna is calling from Mississippi, pronouns are she, her. Hey, Jenna, how did you find your way out?
Hi. I hope your Sunday's going well.
We're live.
I found my way out. I think whenever I was like 6. Or no, not 6, 9.
6, 7. 9.
Sorry, I'm kind of nervous right now. This is the first time I've ever called into a show like this, so
you'd be fine.
I get nervous too, Jenna. I get nervous every show.
I'm
not even lying.
I believe it was whenever I was 9, though. I had a conversation with the pastor, and I don't remember exactly what it was about. It might have been about my mom having cancer in her leg. I don't remember exactly what the question was that I had asked, but I remember his answer, and his answer really upset me, and it got me thinking, because he told me it's not my place to question, it's my place to believe. And even as a 9-year-old kid, I found that really just wrong. And I don't know exactly how to describe why I felt that it was wrong, but I just knew deep down that it was wrong to to tell somebody that, because I mean, even as a kid, I liked learning, and if you're not questioning, you're not learning.
Yeah.
And so I kind of pulled away from religion, and I at school there was a bunch of books on different things like Egypt and stuff like that, and so I actually went to the library and I started learning about all of these different religions and stuff, and the gods and everything. And I kind of, it wasn't like a deep dive into them because I was 9. I just kind of tried to learn what I could. And I kind of came to, I guess, an understanding is the best way that I can describe it, that most of them kind of taught the same thing in the fact of treat others the way that you want to be treated, treat everybody, with respect and kindness. And that's the thing that I took from most of them, is that. And so I was like, okay, well, if they're all telling the same thing, then what does it matter what I believe? And so I was just like, I'm not going back to the church if they're all telling the same thing, and I already know to treat people kindly. So what's the reason of religion if I already know that? Like, so I just kind of pulled away from it, and I haven't really looked back since. But back then I also didn't know that, it was, atheism is what it's called, to not believe. So I didn't have a word for what it was until I was, I think, a teenager, or like 15, 16, 17, something like that, whenever I actually learned what it was called. So, and I mean, whenever I started on this journey, that was like 30 years ago. So it's been a journey.
Yeah.
Impressive to even have again, I still talked about this with the last call, the awareness to be able to understand that at such a young age, that you should have you should be able to ask questions in order to learn. Because it's like, we're taught so many things as kids that you just have to, like, you don't even know if it's okay to ask if Santa Claus is real or not. And then at a certain age, you just sort of get it. You just sort of put the pieces together and go like, I don't think anyone actually thinks this is true. And then maybe you get the courage to ask an adult, like, that's not true, right? And
I mean, on that topic, I mean, it helps whenever you catch your parents hiding the presents.
sure. Or
Well, thanks so much for sharing, Jenna.
Yeah.
It's especially first time call. It's great. You're helping kind of drive interactions in the show, and I think it's worthwhile to see that people find their way out for a lot of different reasons. So,
Yeah, I mean, I like listening to other people talking about the way that they left and found their way on the journey and everything. And I don't think I've ever heard one that's always exactly the same. So
yeah. All right. Well, we've got a theist caller and a couple other atheists on hold, so I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate you calling in to keep us thinking.
Thanks, Jenna.
All right. So we've got a theist caller here. Peter is calling from Michigan to say, I think something happened in the tomb 2,000 years ago, which could be the resurrection of Jesus. And then it just says Shroud of Turin. So, Peter, what tomb are we talking about?
We're talking about the tomb of Jesus of Nazareth.
I'm not aware that there is any such tomb. How do you know that there is?
Because it's in the documents of the Gospels.
Okay. So, first of all, I have no way to verify anything from the Gospels, but the Gospels don't identify a tomb. They just claim a tomb.
Okay. Well, they claim a tomb. That's where I get my information from.
Okay. Well, how do you know that it's possible that you think something happened in a tomb? So the Gospels tell a story, and with no other information, no other evidence, you think they're telling a story of something that possibly happened. How do you know it's possible?
Because we got the receipt,
What's the
What
receipt?
receipt?
the shroud.
You're joking, Peter.
No, I'm perfectly
The
serious.
Shroud of the Shroud of Turin, the Shroud of Turin is a fraudulent thing that does not date back to the 1st century. But even if the Shroud of Turin did date back to the 1st century and wasn't already a proven fraud, how would it prove that Jesus resurrected?
Well, let's just we need to go back to. They're saying now that there's a newer studies and there's an X-ray of 2024 X-ray analysis.
I'm sorry, Peter. Peter, it seems that Peter. It seems that once again, Peter. It seems that once
around 2,000 years old.
Peter. It seems that once again you're not listening to me. I said that it's already been proven to be a fraud, but let's assume for a second that it hadn't been proven to be a fraud. How would the shroud prove that Jesus resurrected?
Well, that's the story. And then we get the shroud, which is
Peter.
the receipt,
Peter, let me ask you.
leftover evidence.
Peter.
Jesus.
Peter.
Hold on, let me speak.
Peter, no, I'm not going to fucking. No, I'm not going to hold on. You're going to hold on. That's the way this works. You're making claims. I'm asking you to defend them. I don't need you to tell me what the story is. I know the fucking story. I need you to tell me why we should believe that the story is possibly true, and then why we should conclude that it's likely and probably true. And if your answer is, well, that's the story, we don't give a fuck. We know the story. We need you to justify why we should believe the story. And if your only reason is it's in the Bible, that's not going to convince us either. So let's try this again. I'm going to unmute Peter. Nobody's been able to hear you this entire time. We're going to unmute you. I know that's difficult for you. When you come back, tell me why you think we should believe the story. That's the only part that matters.
Okay, this is why I think we should believe the story.
Thank you.
Because it is now known that there was a man named Jesus Christ that lived 2,000, not Jesus Christ, but whatever, not Jesus, but Yeshua, that lived 2,000 years ago, was from Nazareth.
No, it's not.
And was crucified.
No, it's not.
Now, if I were to say to you, how do you really know Caesar was stabbed by his buddy? What was his buddy's name? Bruno or whatever.
Brutus.
But anyway,
Brutus.
I mean, I
Peter.
But the thing is,
Okay, Peter, I'm going to mute you again because you don't pause for interruption, and you just keep saying things that aren't true. I asked you why we should believe the story, and you started really well. You started with, I think we should believe the story because, and then your first reason was, it is known that there is an individual named Jesus or Yeshua from Nazareth who was crucified. And my response to you is, no, that's not known. How can we know that's true? Try again.
so you're just saying that Jesus is not a historical figure.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all, Pete. Please listen very carefully. You're saying it is known that Jesus, Yeshua, from Nazareth, is a historical figure who was crucified. And I'm saying that's not known. You need to justify it. I am not asserting that it's false. I'm saying it hasn't been demonstrated to be true. Now demonstrate that it's true.
Well, the only thing I have is writings from 2,000 years ago.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't.
All right,
Peter,
writings from 1,900 years ago.
No,
Whatever,
no,
man.
Peter.
But the
No,
thing-
Peter,
the thing
you
is-
don't. No, Peter,
No,
you
no,
don't.
You want to make
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. Why do you keep lying? You don't have any writings from 2,000 years ago. What you have are modern writings that are copies of translations of books that the oldest copies we have are hundreds of years after the events that they record. So you don't have any writings from 2,000 years ago. But this is the thing. I keep doing this with Pete, and you don't seem to learn. So let's try this again. I'm going to go ahead and pretend that you have a writing. You have a written document, and it's from almost 2,000 years ago. And that document says, Yeshua ben Joseph was crucified, buried in a tomb, and rose from the dead. That is the story. The fact that you have a writing claiming it does not prove the story. So once again, what reason can you present for why we should believe the story is what I'm asking. Don't just tell me more story. Don't make false claims about your documentation of the story. You have no evidence and no documentation. But even if I granted you that you had a firsthand eyewitness account, how would that prove that the story is true?
You prove it because the shroud and the story go hand in hand. You have
already talked
physical
about
evidence from 2,000 years ago with the shroud and the story, and they fit like a hand in a glove.
Okay,
No,
so
they
we
don't.
no, they
I'm
don't.
done.
But
All
we
yours, Austin.
we talk about this all the time on this show, Peter. Okay, even if we grant that, and this is, by the way, you don't actually have evidence that this person existed. You're saying, well, that's how it was written down in the story, and it's like, okay, that there was a guy named Yeshua from this place that it's known. It's not known. It's not like an established fact that this person existed, but even if we do grant that some of the more mundane, everyday, normal human events depicted in the Bible took place. So the example I give all the time is it's like, if I told you today, this is what I did today. I woke up and I got dressed and I got in my car and I drove to the grocery store and I picked up some groceries, got back in my car, and on my way back to my car, this cat on a skateboard skated by and did a kickflip and then flew off into the sky like at the speed of a rocket. It was crazy. And if I can say my proof for this is I've got CCTV footage of me driving in my car to the store, of me walking into the store. We've got security footage at the store of me at the store. I've got a receipt of the stuff I bought at the store. We've got all the footage except for the cat on the skateboard. What more do you need? I would still say I need to see objective evidence that that cat on the skateboard was there, because that's the extraordinary claim being made. So even if we granted you that this guy Yeshua existed, you would still need to demonstrate evidence that he walked on water, that he turned water into wine, that he fed however many people with, one basket of fish and one basket of bread, whatever, that he healed lepers, that he rose from the dead. You would need to provide evidence for all of the extraordinary truth claims being made in this document, even if we granted you that it is accepted fact that there was a historical man named Yeshua from this region who was crucified. Now, we're not granting you that, but even if we did, that's a rather mundane thing. A lot of people were crucified back then. A lot of people were named Yeshua back then. So that's a rather, like me going to the store is not an unbelievable thing. The unbelievable part is that he came back from the dead 3 days later, and that you believe he's going to return to the earth again. That's what we're asking for your evidence for. How do you justify those claims?
All right. Well, let's just go back to the cat on the skateboard.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. You come walking up to me. And you
Yeah.
say, tell me all about your cat on the skateboard thing. And then I say, well, what evidence do you have to show me? And out of your pocket, you pull out a 3D image of a Polaroid that you just took of a cat on a skateboard doing a flip. I'd be like, I'd very much believe you. See, that's what we have, is we have a 3D image on a shroud.
Okay, so first of all,
that shows the
first of all, the Shroud of
crucifixion
Turin is
man
not a 3D
that
image
is
of Jesus.
totally in line
Peter,
with
Peter,
the
hold
man
on,
named
Peter.
Jesus of
Peter,
Nazareth
Peter.
2,000 years ago. Don't talk over me.
Hold on, Peter. This is
Don't talk
my
over
show.
me.
This is my show, you stupid fuck. You don't talk over me. But you don't have a 3D
show me your
image.
picture.
Peter,
Show
you
me
don't
your
have a
picture.
3D. Watch, Peter, I can do this, actually. Here's the funny thing is I can mute you. You can't mute me. So I actually can talk over you. So you're muted now. No one can hear you. But you don't have a 3D image of Jesus Christ being crucified and then raising from the dead in a tomb 3 days later. You're talking about a shroud that has been proven to be fraudulent, that has been proven to be fake. Also, I find it hilarious that you're admitting that if I showed you a Polaroid of a cat on a skateboard and said, this is real, you would believe it. Buddy, that's the problem, is like, you're too gullible. Even if a person, do you know we live in an era of artificially generated images and videos? Like, even if a person showed you a picture of Jesus Christ, like showed you a whole video of it, that's not evidence anymore. But you're saying that like a piece of cloth that people are saying belonged to the guy is the same as hard, irrefutable, 3D rendering evidence of the entire supernatural event. And you're so far off with that claim. And also the thing that you're referencing is fraudulent. I'm unmuting you now, Peter. Do you understand what I just said?
All right, let's just go back to the shroud. The faint brownish image
No.
is technically a photographic image,
No.
which was impossible to create.
No. I'm going to mute you again. The Shroud of Turin is a fraudulent image. It's been carbon dated to between 1260 and 1390 CE. That's over 1,000 years after when you think it comes from. It had DNA verification testing and had DNA from multiple people and from carrots and red coral. There is nothing that would account for the sort of image you're talking about. It is not the way bodies were wrapped, and the head comes to a point. Do you think Jesus's head came to a point like that, where the top of the front of the head and the top of the back of the head, there's it's like you've never ever looked into any story about this. This is one of the most obvious fakes in the world. And even when I fucking gave you the incredible leeway to say, hey, let's pretend that the shroud did date to then. I then asked you, let's pretend that the shroud is real from that time frame. How does it prove a resurrection? And you have nothing. You have nothing but stories that you believe and stories that you think line up. I'm going to ask you the simplest question ever, Peter, and depending on your answer will determine whether or not we waste any more of anybody's time on this. Do you have any empirical evidence to confirm that Jesus rose from the dead? Go ahead.
Yeah.
What?
I would like to see science duplicate the shroud today. They can't.
I'm sorry, Peter.
They
Peter,
can.
I asked you, Peter.
Science can't duplicate what God has.
Oh my God, you're such a fucking troll. You are such an obvious troll. You are either a lunatic who's off his meds, or you are a lying troll, because we're bending over backwards to give you every opportunity. I have more respect for you than you think I do, Peter, because I don't believe you're this fucking stupid. I don't believe that when somebody asks you, do you have empirical evidence? You are so stupid that you think a responsible response to that is to say, I'd like to see science duplicate the shroud. First of all, dipshit, that's not required in order to know that the shroud is fake. But even if we didn't already know that the shroud is fake, it wouldn't be required to disprove it. It would be required for you to prove it. You're doing the exact same thing that apologists do across the board, which is, well, prove God isn't real. Not our job. If you have an unfalsifiable proposition, that's your fault. So I'm going to ask you again, and I swear this will be the last question that I ask you if you don't answer it correctly. Do you have empirical evidence that you can present that confirms Jesus was resurrected?
Well, it just looks like we're going to have to end it here because we're not going to see.
No, you don't get to decide the because of why we're ending it here. We're ending it here because I asked you if you had empirical evidence, and you know for a fucking fact that you do not. And you know for a fact that science has investigated the Shroud of Turin. I gave you the dating of it. I gave you the DNA results of it. A quick Google search would show that. Are there people who still believe it's authentic? Yes, those people are called gullibles. They're a little different from deplorables, but they often tend to get conned into voting the same way deplorables vote. All right. Happy Easter.
Yeah, Peter, you openly admitted that you would believe in a skateboarding cat if I showed you a picture of one. So, I think that what you think empirical evidence is not what empirical evidence actually is. And this is more evidence of Dunning-Kruger, of just people who they try to get into these conversations. And it's like, you don't even know what's being asked for when someone's asking you for empirical evidence. You're just like, well, if someone can show me a picture that they say confirms the thing that's in the book, then it's real. I can show you a pretty solid rendering of Minas Tirith from Middle Earth. They built it. They built a miniature of it for the movie, and it looks really cool. That doesn't mean it's a real place that exists. You don't understand the first thing about what it is that we're even asking for from you. And
I have a 3D model of a dragon.
Yeah.
Does that mean that it was based off of a real dragon, a really real dragon? Rawr.
According to Peter, he'd be like, if you could show me that 3D rendering, sure. Gullible.
It's absolutely wild. So here's the thing. Theists, Christians in particular, is that how you're going to let this stand? Are you going to just sit back and allow your side to be represented by Peter? Peter, who doesn't know a thing and who thinks that the Shroud of Turin is real and that the book alone is enough evidence to believe in this miraculous resurrection. I think that you are. I think that every sincere Christian sitting out there right now is going to continue to refuse to call in to defend this, because some of them are fine with Peter's take on it. They're just as gullible, and they just think we're mean for asking for evidence and refusing to take avoidance as an answer. The others know that they don't have anything better to offer. This is the whole reason that, Apologia has that, for the Bible tells me so jingle, because at the end of the day, all you're really doing is saying, this is my team. This is the book I believe in. I don't need any evidence. I don't need to defend it to anybody. I don't care that 1 Peter 3:15 requires me to be ready to offer a defense. All it does is require me to offer a response. And my response is, I believe the Bible. God said it. That's good enough for me. Actually, God said it. That's it. Whether you believe it or not. Boom. Oh no. Yes, I've been there. I had all the slogans. The what would Jesus do? God said it, I believe it, that settles it for me. And then you cross out the I believe it because it settles it whether you believe it or not. Oh, we completely owned all those scientists going around talking about their evolution and stuff. It's nonsense. There are no sincere, knowledgeable Christian apologists. That's my assertion. Matter of fact, I'd be happy to change the line at the bottom of the show from "Did the resurrection actually happen?" to "There are no sincere, honest Christian apologists." Because every single one that we interact with and every single one that I have debated in the past has either been shown to be insincere or dishonest. Happy Easter. All right. Here we go with some more atheists calling in.
I'm glad that his name was Peter. I feel like that was Providence, that on Easter, like Peter Rabbit. I feel like it was, and it's a biblical name. I'm glad his name was Peter.
Oh, somebody decided to let us know that Justin, Dr. Blitz, and Ian are all on now, and they're jumping over there so that they don't have to suffer slow mode. Bye. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. Tell them I said hi. They'll be over here later. All right, Mick, thank you for waiting. Mick's calling in to talk about the moment they stop believing.
Yeah, my pronouns are he, him. I want to say thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm going to be talking about my experience with conversion therapy. So I encourage people to take care of themselves as I share.
Yes, please.
And I'm going to trust Matt and is it Aaron or
Austin?
Yes. Austin, sorry. I just said yes.
Austin. I'm gonna trust Matt and Austin that if I get swept up in what I'm saying, that y'all will help bring me back.
Okay.
Y'all are good at that. So
I'll do what I can.
I'm going to try to give a little bit of backstory and then go into the experience. When I was a teenager, my mom, she struggled with mental health her whole life. She was convinced that I was a bad kid, and so she had me go to a church group, which ended up being one of the most right-wing churches in my state, unbeknownst to me. And I got online and I started talking with other church people, and I met this church lady from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, my mom made a really poor choice with her dating and the internet in the mid-90s and decided to move to Tulsa for some guy she had just met. And I went with her. She ended up having a mental health crisis and abandoning me. After that, I had just gotten home from a church youth group in Tulsa when that happened. So she kicked me out, and I became the church lady who I had talked with online became my guardian. One of the worst churches in Tulsa at the time. So one day, my guardian discovered that I was queer. I'm a trans man, so at the time, I was seen as a girl, and so my guardian from this ultra right-wing Christian nationalist church gave me an ultimatum. I either go through an exorcism or I'd be homeless.
Wild.
So I decided to subject myself to the exorcism.
Wow.
Now, I liked my youth pastors. And, a little bit of backstory from my religious experiences. I would go to church and sing and speak in tongues and all this stuff. And I thought I was having, I wanted to convince myself I was having a real experience. But my youth pastor, who I liked, all of a sudden, I was having a really strange experience. Yeah, it wasn't standard conversion therapy, and forced exorcism. It took me a long time to actually come to terms with that with the fact that is conversion therapy. But
The exorcism
put
is
me in this bathtub.
I've missed part of what you're describing. It took you a while to realize that what part wasn't?
So she had me get into a tub, and she read from like some book, like it filled with water. I had to sit in this tub, and she read from this book, and she was trying to get me to, like, for hours, to draw some demon out of me. So at some point I decided that I had to pretend to speak in tongues to get out of it.
Hmm.
And I knew I was pretending. I was, shivering cold in this bathtub at this point, and pretending to speak in tongues, pretending to be possessed by a demon in order to get out of this situation. So it was this experience that woke me up to the fact that I was being abused. And then an event happened that allowed me some distance. My guardian's 10-year-old son started hitting me, like, really hard, like punching me. I was like 16, 17 at the time, somewhere around there, almost 17. And I ended up calling my boyfriend at the time to come get me out of the situation. And luckily, he was well-resourced enough and able enough to come out, drive multiple states to come get me. And that gave me distance, which, where I landed, wasn't religious at all. So it was the experience of realizing that I was abused, and also getting distance from the religious community, that allowed me to really get out.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm sorry that happened to you. I mean, on the other hand, I'm glad that you figured out what was going on and found your way free. But I mean, that story is not going to be anything like any of us.
I do
I
think
know
it's
other queer people
interesting.
have experienced something.
Well, what I think is interesting is people who do believe in the phenomenon of exorcisms, and they believe that that's real demonic possession, all of this stuff that there's a lot of people who really sincerely believe in this, and these documented incidences of, like the whole Conjuring movie series is based on Ed and Lorraine Warren, whatever their names were, that would go around and deal with these cases of exorcism. But a lot of these situations are exactly what you're describing, where it's like a scared kid who is performing what they think they need to perform to to stay safe in an environment where the adults around them are behaving incredibly erratically and basically being insane. I don't know if you remember Elizabeth Smart. It was a big deal where I'm from in Utah.
Mhm.
She was kidnapped in 2002 from her bedroom by a guy who called himself Emmanuel, and
Yeah.
thought he was a prophet. And similar to your story, the way that she finally started, the way that she convinced him to go back to Utah, they left the state, was she just decided to kind of talk to him in his language, and she would just be like, I've had a visitation from the voice of God has told me that we need to be back in Utah. And she would be like, and I know that he wouldn't speak to me. He would only speak to you. But he said that if you ask, that it would, but she was so deeply in character in this role to stay safe as a 14-year-old girl, that when a police officer approached her as they came back to Utah, and he even separated her from her captors and looked at her and said, I need you to tell me that you're Elizabeth Smart. I need you to say those words so that I can do what I need to do here and arrest these people. And what she said back to him was, thou sayest. She didn't even feel safe saying it in like just like, yeah, that's my name. Like she was so deep in the character of playing her part as the ordained wife of this madman, that she was playing along. And so a lot of evangelicals and people who do the speaking in tongues thing and all this stuff, they'll see all of this quote unquote evidence of like, oh, I've watched people being possessed. I've watched people speaking in tongues. But a lot of times what it is people who are just terrified, who are playing the part because they're surrounded by insane people with more power than them, insane people with more authority than
100%.
them. Yeah. So pretty interesting the way that quote unquote evidence can come to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to say that the shame from that experience also left me in a similar way, but unfortunately, that's the sticky stuff. But I just want to say thank you for taking my call, and I hope this helps someone.
Yeah. Wild stuff, Mick. I'm glad you made it out. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Happy Easter,
talking to
y'all.
Jimmy real quick.
Happy Easter, Mick. I hope that you find some eggs with some money in them. Those are the best ones when you find one that like your grandpa put like $1 in.
The I see, so Easter egg stuff was never. I don't think it was like a thing for me. When I hear stories from people like Mick, and thanks so much for sharing. It's I grew up in a fundamentalist, evangelical, Southern Baptist kind of normal Midwest Missouri home. And I don't have bad memories of it. I have good memories of all of it. I mean, I'm not saying every moment was, puppies and flowers and kittens and whatever else, but I don't really have a lot of regrets. I despise the religion that I was brought up in because I now see it for what it is. That is a parade of lies and false hopes and immoral actions that have managed to corrupt humanity and dignity of virtually every person that interacts with it. And the ones that it doesn't seem to corrupt are the ones that were completely immune to the harmful and evil doctrines within it and just wanted to look at the turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor, engage in charity. And these people were going to be good people no matter what. And I just wish they were doing good for the sake of doing good, not doing good because they think that's what God or Jesus wants, because that's cherry picking and dishonest as fuck. And so then there's another group of people who, because of what that book says, will punish and torture, will support corruption and immorality. I don't know how far removed they are from supporting slavery. I mean, it's in there. It's in there more explicitly than a number of other things that they export. There's nothing, you know, you can make jokes all day about how, oh, God's definitely woke because he created he, them. And in Christ, there's neither male nor female. Oh, so everybody's non-binary and blah, blah. I mean, you can make jokes like that and make it woke. But there are people who look at those verses like that and they try to spin the Bible to be more in line with the goodness that they already support. And on the one hand, I'd much prefer those people. On the other hand, they don't have a biblical leg to stand on. And how do you oppose? Hey, you're queer? Well, let's get you an exorcism and let's actually physically torture you. When the Supreme Court made its decision the other day on conversion therapy, it may have been the correct decision on legal constitutional grounds about what you can and can't prohibit. But and I'm not even sure of that because I haven't dug in much. That's about what the law is. And they have to decide based on the previous laws, based on what we have as a society agreed upon or failed to agree upon. And if you build the laws of society in such a way that they are rooted in individual autonomy and dignity, and where they support the freedom and we remove the bigotry that while you have the right to be a bigot, you don't have the right to impose that bigotry on anybody else? The bizarre nature of conversion therapy, which is torture, which does not work, which, by the way, no adult, I mean, I'd say it's false imprisonment, kidnapping, any number of things, not to mention that even if you're a parent doing it to your kids, you don't own your fucking kids. You are the stewards of those kids. You are the caretakers of those kids. And if your version of caretaking is, oh, this child doesn't conform to my fantasy man in the skies definition of what a person's supposed to be, therefore, let me beat it the fuck out of them. You're a garbage human being, and your religion has only made you worse.
I'm very fascinated between in the relationship between mental illness and religious belief, and obviously correlation is not causation, but I feel like we need to look more into how adherence to religious beliefs and supernatural beliefs and a literal belief in supernatural stories for which there is no evidence can kind of embolden maybe dormant traits for for potential like psychotic breaks or psychosis, or can even just create them, because this happens over and over and over again. And it's so weird because the other people that are part of that exact same church will see something like Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand, who, started their whole their whole own offshoot course of marriage counseling and family counseling in the LDS church, and it was very successful. They were making a ton of money doing it. And then it came out that Jody and Ruby were convinced that all of these people were suffering from demonic possession. And they were telling people to do things like starve your kids and, make them stand out in the sun for, 10 hours at a time so that you can burn the demons out of them and things like that. And then when the sane, quote unquote, sane members of the church find out about that, they're like, oh, how horrible, how horrifying. But it's like, but don't you guys believe in all that stuff? You believe in demons. You believe that there is a literal devil going around waging a spiritual war for the souls of all mankind. So why are they crazy for believing that that devil had been successful in possessing some of these kids, but you're not crazy for believing that the devil is waging spiritual warfare through things like, gender ideology and drag shows and stuff like that. It's all the same stuff. It's all the same, but it's just once people see, it's just like, it seems like once people of faith see the consequences, the dire consequences of the things that they believe in, and they see it being used to abuse children and stuff like that, all of a sudden some part of their brain clicks on and goes, oh, well, that's bad. But they're not able to make the connection. I believe in the exact same thing. I guess I just don't take it to the level of starving my kid to, because in Ruby Franke's mind, she was starving the demon. And she would write down in her journal, I'm willing to let my child die to kill this demon, because I believe the demon has full control over the child. And I would rather let the child die than let the demon win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a couple more atheists calling in about the moment or moments where they figured out that they didn't have good reason to believe and couldn't believe anymore, or maybe where they just got mad at God. That's it. I mean, theists aren't going to call in, Christians aren't going to call in to defend the resurrection. They know this is a lost cause. They know they have no way to resolve the contradictions. They know they have no evidence to point to. All they have is, for the Bible tells me so, and can't rely on that. And so I guess maybe we'll get some theists calling in about something else. Maybe they'll point us. So here's all these people. And by the way, I think all of our deconversion stories so far have been from Christianity or some version of Christianity. That's kind of interesting, because now is the opportunity for some Hindu or Muslim or Scientologist to call in and explain that's all these people left a false religion and I have the real one. Gonna bet that doesn't happen either. But let's give it a shot. The atheist mechanic, who I know has a bamboo ball python, calling from Tennessee, pronouns him. Hey, tell us about when you knew you didn't believe or couldn't believe.
Well, hey, Matt and Austin, it's good to be here. For me, when I guess when I really knew, I came out of the closet when I was in my early 20s, I want to say. And when I finally wanted to express that to my parents, the reaction that I got was, I guess you can say it's kind of the typical reaction. But like my dad, he stopped talking to me for a solid month. And then my mom, she kept throwing the Bible in my face. You're going to hell. This is not the way we treat or we raised you. You know better than this. We raised you to know right from wrong. You know this is wrong. And it just kept going on, which before that, I was already questioning my belief. And that kind of pushed me further. And so for me, I know it's not really a tragic story, not that it needs to be, but that's kind of what pushed me out of my belief that believers can be that harsh towards someone just because they live differently. That didn't sit right with me.
A lot of that hits home, mechanic, in the sense that, you know, we raised you better than that. You know, like you even sounded a little like my mom when you did that voice. That didn't come out. I mean, that was just common. That had nothing to do with, you know, some particular sin. That was every time I did something that they didn't approve of. It was, you know better than that. We raised you better than that. You know, and at the time when I was still a believer, it was, you know, you need to think about how this is going to impact your Christian witness. And that was the kind of guilt cycle that, you know, as a Southern Baptist I was in, which was you live as a normal human. You have your doubts, you have your thoughts, you have your, you know, desires and concerns, and then you get convicted by parents and pastors for not being a good enough Christian, and then you go into church on Sunday and you rededicate your life. So where Catholics have confession and some sort of little penance involved, Baptists don't have confession and penance. They just have accusatory parents and a motivation to go in and redo. The number of times I and people around me rededicated our lives to Christ is staggering.
I was raised in the Methodist church here in my part of Tennessee, and it was mainly my grandparents that they wanted the grandkids to go to church and stuff like that. And as I grew up in the church, the pastor that we had there, he pushed us to go to an event up in Pigeon Forge called Resurrection. It's basically where people like dedicate their lives to Christ and stuff like that. And that was the first time I'd ever done that. And then afterwards, we went through the confirmation classes and everything. And it came as a shock to everyone that I don't believe anymore. And I'm like, everyone has these questions, but you choose to push them aside. I don't push them aside.
Yeah.
It just kind of struck me as odd, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the church that I was raised in, they call putting that on the shelf. So there's literally a phrase for it where people say, sometimes you just need to take something and put it on the shelf. If there's something that's causing you to doubt or causing you some kind of trepidation in your convictions, you just take that thing and you put it on the shelf. It's crazy. They've actually built culturally colloquial language for thought terminating behavior. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And like later, like after I'd come out to my parents and stuff, the topic of dating became a whole other source of argument and fights and stuff. My dad, like, he never tried to interact with it or anything. He just kept doing his own thing. But my mom, she talked about, she works for a snack company that's local here. And she said one of her friends, in their culture, they use arranged marriages. And she wishes that we would do that here. I said, well, the good thing about living in America is we don't do that shit. And that started a whole other bit of stuff. But our relationship is good now. She still doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff that I do, but we can actually talk about it without things getting heated. And if it does get heated, we kind of push it aside and just say, we're not going to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, I've been to Pigeon Forge. I didn't go to that actual event that you were talking about, but it is wild how we have to kind of make these sort of accommodating agreements of we're not going to talk about this, we're not going to talk about that, because we care more about each other and the relationship than we do about the religion. And it's the permission slip that, I gave to my parents, which was, put it back on God. It's not your response, my salvation, my dispensation of my soul. None of that is my parents' responsibility. It's God's responsibility to show that he's real, that he exists, that he gives a damn, that the various stories are real. And instead, if there is a God, he's absolutely doing nothing and leaving all of his believers hanging out to dry and looking incredibly foolish. I mean, while we'll make fun of Peter for the Turin and just not being able to answer questions and everything else, to be fair, I'll retract a part of what I said about Peter. He's at least calling in and willing to show everybody how ridiculous he is. The problem is that I don't think has any interest or hope in kind of learning and recognizing that you're offering bad arguments. I mean, if I ask somebody, hey, do we have the Artemis 2 mission currently up in space, getting ready to go around the moon right now? And they say, oh, absolutely, and I can prove it because I've got a lucky rabbit's foot. I mean, we'd lose our fucking mind. I'd be banging my head on the table because no, that's not how you would demonstrate it. It's so bizarre that for all of these things, when they, well, you can't prove this, well, you can't prove this, well, that's, the earth is flat, the earth is young, all these things that are demonstrably false, snakes don't have inner ears, whatever it is, we know the information. And there's like an entire segment of the population that has no idea what could or should qualify as a reasonable justification for things. And then they go about taking their Dunning-Kruger supported ignorance and bigotry and using it to malign the people who are different from them. It's so tiring. Thanks a ton for calling in, Mechanic, and for all your support.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.
Thanks for the call. Enjoy your Easter.
We got some more atheists calling in, and I think there may actually be a theist calling in at the moment. But Arden, were you getting ready to say something or had an announcement? I thought I heard. That may not be happening. Nope.
Join the Patreon for the line if you haven't. There's an announcement.
There you go.
for Easter. Get on the Patreon.
Today is Sunday, April 5th. Right now we are live with Sunday Show for the next hour and 10 minutes. And then there's a Calling It Now that'll take over at 4 p.m. And that'll run until the Sunday Show After Dark will be at 7 p.m. Although, weird. I'm looking at the overview and not the actual schedule who's going to be on. So today it's me and Austin. On the Sunday show after dark, it's going to be Forrest and Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels. And on Wednesdays, hang up, I'll be back with Brady Goodwin. Monday's Skeptalk is going to be Forrest and Aaron Adair. And Tuesday's Chewed Gum is going to be Taylor and Alyssa again. Cranking it out. If you're not familiar with any of those shows, you need to like and subscribe to the line and get ready because there's a lot more stuff coming, including patron support with miniature line cons, and there'll be bigger line cons where the hosts get together and get to interact with our patrons and supporters. I'm planning on in one of the upcoming line cons, assuming Jimmy says boo. I'm probably going to be teaching some magic tricks and some basics about skepticism and stuff related to those tricks that you can either learn from them or, how to avoid getting scammed or maybe how to scam someone out of a free drink at a bar. I'm basically, I just realized when I said that I'm stealing something from Brian Brushwood. So sorry, Brian, I'm not actually doing scam school, but I'm schooling about potential scams a little bit and maybe some fun magic, but it's not going public. For those who don't know, Brian Brushwood is a wonderful magician and a friend of mine, and I've done episodes of Scam School in the past, once upon a time. Hey, Austin, you ready?
I'm ready.
To talk about potentially. I see what we're going to do. So John is a theist from Canada, pronouns are him, and it says here, "What made you an atheist?" and wants to ask if the resurrection was proven, would you believe it? So, John, yes, if you could prove a resurrection, I would absolutely believe that the resurrection occurred. That's true for anything that you could actually demonstrate. I'm an atheist because no God claims ever made the burden of proof. Austin, what's your take on that?
I'm thrilled. I genuinely, one of the reasons why I do this show, and I mean this, John, is because there is some small part of me that thinks every time I get on the show, somebody might call in and be the person who says something who offers me a piece of evidence that I've just never heard before, who is able to structure the argument in a way that actually makes sense, and it would maybe potentially re-simplify my life because I could go, oh, okay, great. I can now go back to believing that there is some kind of grand design that is above my pay grade that makes sense of existence and the universe. So I'm genuinely hopeful, John, that you have something today for us that is novel and that can be demonstrated empirically, that really works as legitimate evidence.
Yep. So welcome, John. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does, gentlemen. And I'd like to say happy Easter Sunday. I hope it's going well for you.
It's Sunday. I don't give a shit that it's Easter, but thanks.
Okay. And I just want to say, okay, I heard your stories, but I just like to say, does it mean anything to you that hundreds, thousands, millions of people find comfort, solace in the Christian faith?
It doesn't mean that the Christian faith is in any way tied to a real God. I appreciate the fact that many people find value in it. I wish they were finding value in something that was demonstrably real. But the fact that it's important, and I'm sure there's somebody out there who would be a mass murderer. Like, I know of at least one psychopath that tried to kill his dad who thinks the only reason he's not running around killing people is because he believes in Jesus. So I'd like him to keep believing, even if it's not true. But the fact that people find comfort in it is irrelevant to whether or not it's true. And that's all I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah, John, just really quick, like if the standard of evidence that you're calling in is asking us, like, does it matter? Does it move the needle for you that so many people find comfort in the Christian faith? I would just pose back to you. Does it do anything for you that 2 billion people are Islamic? That 2 billion people find comfort and solace and truth in the Muslim faith?
What people believe, what they find solace is, doesn't concern me. Whatever works for you, the same way whatever works for you. And just like you, I am looking for the truth.
So do you believe that Islam is just as true as Christianity? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that whatever works for the individual.
Okay. So are you saying you don't care about what's true? You only care if something is beneficial?
I'm saying I care about the truth.
Okay, and now I'm confused
Right now,
because
it's true right now
because
that right now
I'm no, something isn't true right now just because it hasn't been proved false.
I totally agree.
Okay,
Then
so where's the
I'm talking to you right now.
Where's the demonstration that Christianity is reasonably justified for belief?
Oh, I can't really prove it to you, but I've seen lots of people whose lives have been changed by it.
Why did you ask when you called in, John? Why did you say, "Would you accept the resurrection if I could prove it?" Why was that your question? If the response you're immediately giving is, "Well, it's not something I can prove." Why did you ask
No,
if
I did not say I could prove it. I said if it was proven. That's what I said. I guess.
Sure. Yeah. And so we said, sure. So you're on the show to presumably do that, but I guess not. Like you're just here to be like, ah, cool. So if I hypothetically could prove it to you, you would believe in it, but I can't. So, all right.
I didn't say I could prove it. I said if it was proven. That's what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you saying, John, that you don't have any good reason for us to believe in Christianity?
I'm saying that you should keep your minds open.
Okay,
Why?
that's not what I asked, nor do I need you to call in 26 times to continue to avoid the question that I'm asking. Are you saying that you do not have good evidential reasons for us to accept Christianity? Is that what you're saying?
I don't have any good scientific evidence. That's what I'm saying.
I'm see, this is the point,
Okay.
John. I'm not going to let you piss me off, despite the fact that what you did and said just did. You don't listen. You don't answer the question that's asked. You called in and you asked, what made us an atheist? And if the resurrection were proven, we believe it. Austin and I both answered both of your questions before we ever said a word. We answered them directly, and we answered the exact question you asked. Did I ask you if you had scientific evidence? The answer is no. I don't need you to fucking chime in with the yes or no, because you'll just go off on something else. I didn't ask you if you had scientific evidence. I asked you if what you were saying is that you do not have a good reason for us to believe in Christianity. That's a yes or a no.
I said no.
Okay. I am tired of John lying and pretending like he answered things when I'm calling him out for not answering it. John, do you have good reason for us to believe that Christianity is true?
No, I do not.
Then do not call back in again. The whole point is for you to be defending your belief. If you're just calling in to say, I can't defend my belief, we already fucking knew that.
John, can I just ask, since we've got you here, why do you believe in it, though?
He left.
Oh, he left? Okay. All right. It's like, it's so strange. Like, why, what is the point of calling in? Why even, how strange is it like a humiliation kink? You just want to go on the internet and be like, hey, like to ask the question, would you guys be down with this if I could prove it to you? And we're both like, yeah, of course. That's the whole point of the show. And then it's like, can you prove it? No, I didn't say that. Obviously I can't, but like, good to know that you would if I could. Okay.
Yeah, we've got some theist callers, but one of them popped in just as I was getting ready to click live on this. I want to take this one because somebody wants to call me out for something, and I'd like to at least hear it and address it. So Mike, pronouns he, they in Georgia, thinks I've said racially insensitive things and wanted to know how sincerely I meant it, specifically use of blacks and melanin afflicted. Hey, Mike, what is it that I said and when?
Hey there. It's not really a call. It's just more clarification on like how you meant to say this. But there was one time you were on a call and it was about, I know the video, I think it was called Faith versus Falsifiable Claims. And you had talked about people being melanin afflicted. And I guess in every use of the word afflicted, that's not really a good thing. And so I was wondering if you think that having melanin is, I guess, an affliction. And another time I guess
No, I don't
over
think it's an
some
affliction
other
in the
videos.
slightest. I don't know which one you're talking about. And having done this for 20 years, all I can say is, if in fact I said that, I'm virtually certain that it was sarcastic against the people who would view melanin as affliction.
Yeah, it almost sounds like something you would say about like racist white people, or like it sounds like something you'd be like, as a white person, I'm melanin afflicted. Like I don't have, I lack the requisite melanin to protect my skin from the harsh sun. Like
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay. And I guess my
You
other
can also
instance is sometimes
I want you to get the other one. I'm just going to say, if you want, you can send me a link to the call to my email address and I'll review it. What was the other one?
it's just on some occasions you call black people blacks instead of black people. I was just wondering what that's about. But I thought I had sent an email to sansdeity@gmail.
I have no recollection of ever doing that, and it's something that I have frequently opposed, and literally opposed this morning, and called out and mocked this morning with Arden. Yeah, send me a clip where I referred to black people as blacks.
All right.
Now he's
Okay,
gonna
that was
clip. Now he's gonna clip you saying that, and just right there.
Well, in any case, it, I can't imagine that there's any clip of me saying that in a context where I am being serious or using that as a reference. And if so, I wholeheartedly, unreservedly apologize, because that's not the way I would reference that, nor do I think it's a good thing.
I would just say this really quick, Mike, that like I clock the use of the term blacks all the time when it's often like Republican senators or Congress people doing interviews, and they'll be talking about demographics and they use the word blacks all the time. My ear clocks it all the time. But I'm also aware that just like as preferred nomenclature changes, not everyone is always 100% up to date on like when certain changes have been made. When I'm not saying that this is Matt, I'm just saying sometimes this stuff happens and it genuinely is just like, oh, I wasn't aware that that's like not a, like people get confused even about like when we say people of color versus colored person, and people go like, well, what's the difference between those two? And it's just like, well, you prioritize person first. It's person first language. And these are sort of like nuances of language that we try to adopt in advocacy spaces where we're trying as hard as we can to be as, it's like uh terminology like unhoused versus homeless and things like that, and I don't think it always is a matter of malicious intent. Sometimes people are just not, they haven't read the latest pamphlet on why we're adjusting to a new uh colloquial phrasing. Um, but I like you, my ear clocks that whenever I hear it. I'm trained to hear it, and to clock it. But I'm not again, I'm not saying that this is something Matt has done. I'm just saying,
Send me
yeah.
links to the clips. You think you
Yeah,
sent them
okay,
to
I will.
Sans Deity. What should I look for in the title?
Questions about your racial insensitive comments. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I guess we would just need to see examples of what you're referring to.
How long ago do you think you would have sent them?
This was a while ago. I just haven't caught you online. I think it was like a few months ago.
A few months ago. So
in 2025, I think.
Okay. Well, doing a search for the word racial in my email, I will look through and see what I can find, but I'm not finding anything, and I'm all the way back to 2024 now.
All right, I'll resend it. I'll resend the stuff. It's Sans SANS deity, right?
Yes, sans.deity@gmail.com.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for the confusion.
I remember growing up, my mother used the term Oriental a lot because that was just the nomenclature she knew. And we had a really heated conversation one day where I had to tell her, like, you've got to stop saying that. And she was like, that's what it I was told that was the respectful term. And I'm like, cool, all right, it has been adjusted.
Yeah.
And but again, it's like I sometimes it's not always coming from a place of being overtly or intentionally insensitive. And so I think sometimes in progressive spaces, we're trained to clock these things and to notice these things, and we immediately jump to, why did you say that rude thing or that insensitive thing or that? And the answer might just be as simple as like, oh, in that moment, it was not. He could be referencing a clip from bef- before, because I'm old enough to remember when everyone was saying African American. And that was the thing that was like that was the respectful advocate term. And I remember being told at some point, like, oh, you can just call us black people. That's fine. And when I first started switching to that, feeling weird, like I would be like, every time I'd say it, I'd be like, is that okay? Am I allowed to say that? And I
Yeah.
think in the pursuit of using sensitive language as an advocate, sometimes it can get stuff comes out of your mouth and you're like, that sounds weird. Is that all right? Is that all right what I just said? you know, and it's not always I do believe that, from like conservative people and even from a particular faction of protest voting leftists, that things like refusing to pronounce Kamala Harris's name correctly is intentional. I just don't believe that they don't actually know how to pronounce her name correctly. And I do believe that it is a deliberate move to use language like blacks instead of black people, and that they know very well what they're doing, and that it is an intentional dog whistle and an intentional sign of disrespect. But I don't know that it's always that.
Yep. I don't know. I'll keep an eye out. I literally just did multiple email searches and found no such email about my supposed racial insensitivity. If anybody else has examples or thinks they've heard something similar, by all means, you can email. You don't have to email me directly. You can email the line and complain, and I'll apologize and correct and everything else. I I've done 20 years of call-in shows, and I also was not, while I was surrounded by racists in my extended family, my immediate family was constantly trying to call them out. I'm not saying I'm immune to racist thought or insensitive language or anything like that. I don't recall. I will denounce it. I will correct it, but cool. All right, here we go. Jason is calling from Indiana. Pronouns are he, him. Jason's a theist who wants to talk about near-death experiences and what we think of that. Well, hey, Jason, how are you?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Austin. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Long story short, I never really. I was brought up to believe in God. I don't know much about the Bible or anything like that. I'm a video. Excuse me. I'm a video editor, and I was, you know, living my life doing videos on all these different sorts of topics, and religion and God and all this was the furthest thing from my mind. Well, in 2024, I ran into a heart problem and had to go to the ER. And then there I really started thinking about it, um, and after that, I found this show. I've been listening to this show for
quite a while, and I like your guys. I like the deep talks on philosophy and just the conversations that go on here. And I just want to know what you guys think of near-death experiences, because I was looking into a lot of that shit after my episode with my heart. And it scares the shit out of me, honestly.
Yeah, there's several things that I could say about this, Jason, just off the top of my head. One is I'm just going to go right into the unreliability of memory. So, and the way that people can tell a story so many times that it takes on new characteristics every time they tell it, and then eventually it becomes this really clear thing that they swear they remember seeing, when maybe it was, I mean, what we know about the process of dying is that your brain is releasing a chemical called DMT that can have hallucinogenic and psychotropic properties. But let's say that it starts off as, I had this really wild experience where I was dying in a hospital bed, flatlining, and I started seeing some like pretty intense geometric shapes and colors because I was tripping on DMT. But then as you tell the story more and more and you want to relate it to a particular spiritual practice, you start to go like, and I saw the face of Jesus and he was welcoming, you know, and you start to, and people can really do this. I mean, there's one of my favorite podcasts is called Heavyweight, and there's this great episode with the comedian Rob Corddry where his whole family swears that he's making up this story about breaking his arm when he was like 13 years old. And they think that he is stealing the story from his brother, that it was actually his brother who broke his arm. And Rob is such a narcissist. He's so self-obsessed that he has made that story about himself. And it is this crazy odyssey where they're interviewing everybody in the family and going, do you remember Rob breaking his arm when he was 13? And they're all going, he's lying about that. That did not happen. It was our brother that did it. And they have to go through, they track down the hospital records for the hospital he was at and all this stuff. And like, and they have to go through it. It's this long process of trying to verify what actually happened, who's telling the truth. And it turns out they finally find this photo of him in a school play with this cast on. And they have that in accordance with the hospital records. And they're able to prove to the family that everyone is misremembering this. And the reaction from the people in this family when they realize that they have been accusing their son and their brother of lying about breaking his arm for like 30 years, that they've just been telling this story wrong for 30 years. And they've been telling the story so specifically that they all swore, everyone in the family swore it was a matter of established fact that this never happened. But then objective evidence shows them like, no, he broke his arm and you guys are just misremembering it. But there's something about the way that we photocopy and then rephotocopy and then rephotocopy memories, where it could start off as, I had a pretty trippy experience while flatlining in a hospital bed one day. And over the course of 10 to 15 to 20 years, you're telling some very, very vivid, specific story about how you spoke to Jesus and he told you this very specific message. And you swear in your brain it's real. You swear that that's what really happened. But at some point, you might have known that you were a little bit embellishing, and then you added another little embellishment. But at some point, you forgot about the which parts were the embellishments and which parts were real. And so I you know, as a starting off point, I would say that like there's a lot of stuff going on chemically in the body while the body is shutting down and dying, and then also humans tend to be unreliable narrators, especially when it comes to really, you know, heightened fantastical stories that they tell a lot, stories that are repeated a lot.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, it just, you know, like I think Matt quoted Mark Twain a few episodes back, you know, that saying, I've been dead for billions and billions of years and I wasn't inconvenienced at all.
Yeah.
It just,
the thing is I don't understand, because you're like, it terrifies you. Is just the notion of dying terrifying you, the notion of being dead terrifying you, or does the specifics of the near-death experience accounts, is that what terrified you?
just knowing one day that's going to be me. probably the notion of dying, the process.
But that's going to happen to everybody. I don't see. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to minimize or belittle this at all. But first of all, I find near-death experiences boring and useless, other than what they tend to tell us about human psychology, because there's no reason to think that any of them are in fact telling us anything about a life after death, because they're not after death. Most of the time you're talking about a brain that's starved of oxygen, and then you're talking about a brain that recovers and has to invent a story to make sense of what they just happened, what they experienced, what they didn't experience, all the things that Austin was talking about. But let's assume for a second that we could trust our brains. Like, I would say that near-death experiences are one of the times when we absolutely, most obviously, cannot rely on our brains or our memory. You know, an oxygen-deprived, recovering, damaged brain is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, by definition, less reliable than a normally functioning one. But there are competing stories out there from these near-death experiences. And the fact that they don't all agree is, I think, incredibly strong evidence that the various afterlife narratives that they're pulling from, none of them are true. Because if there was an afterlife that they would experience, you would expect it to be the same reports. And instead, what you get are Catholics report Catholic imagery and Protestants report Protestant imagery. And by the way, I'm talking about by and large, not everybody. There are people who've had experiences from other religions that they've heard about. And there are people who claim that they had visualizations and imagery from religions they never even heard of before. And those people are liars, or at least failing to remember that throughout this robust experience of living a life, you're going to encounter all sorts of stories. There's just no way you can live in the 20th and 21st century, the end of the 20th and the early 21st century, where you have the internet and television and, you know, oh, I went and saw K-pop Demon Hunters, but I'd never heard of any sort of, you know, never thought of any iconography from, you know, Asian influence. Yes, you have. It's all over the place. You just don't recognize what you're soaking up. Why would near-death stories ever be different if they were real?
Right. I don't know.
I mean, it's not like you send 10 people in to go see the new Spider-Man movie, and it's not like there's 10 people that went in and 4 come out talking about Spider-Man, 2 come out talking about Superman, and there's 4 others that are talking about Harry Potter, as if that's the movie they watched. But that's what you get from near-death experiences.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but it's just, I'm disabled. I can't walk. You know, I got fucked over at birth by God, or whatever you want to say. And I spent a lot of time in my room watching TV and, you know, editing videos, whatever. And I think a lot, you know, and I get stuck in my head a lot. And I'm 43 now, and you get billions and billions of years of non-existence, and all of a sudden, boom, you exist, and you come out of the womb, and you're aware, and you fucking, you know, you learn through school, you know, math and English and all this shit, and you grow up and you find out what you're good at, and, you know, if you're lucky, you have years and years and years of, you know, happiness with people around you, you know, doing what you like to do, and you become established, and then, you know, one day people get sick, pass away, and, you know, it all starts to get taken from you, and then you die. It just seems like life is just one big fucking tease. So here it is. Be happy for a while, and then your mom dies or whoever dies, and there you go. It's just like one big tease, you know. I may be going off. I'm sorry.
No, it's completely understandable in the sense that religions have completely, thoroughly poisoned people's perceptions of the human existence, the human condition, and built up incredible misrepresentations of death and dying. It is, I think it's one of the more atrocious things that religions have done. And what it means is that, you know, my friend Chris Johnson, I just did a show with him recently, talking about his new documentary, which is I Bid You Peace, a story about the accusations against the frugal gourmet. But prior to that, he did another documentary about 100 atheists providing their explanations for meaning and purpose in a life without God. And it's all, my answer has been the same for ages. And life is its own reward. And there's going to be a mix of good or bad. And it's not going to be the same mix for everybody. And it's going to change. And there are going to be occasions for some people where life is no longer generally preferable to not being alive. And instead of pretending like there's a happy land to go to or some purpose or that some God or being did this to you for a reason, or being frustrated that the universe is this bait and switch and you only get a couple of seconds of it, every second you spend, and I'm not just coming after you, Jason, I'm just saying this globally, every second you spend upset that life hasn't turned out the way you wish it had, or isn't currently operating the way you wish it had, is a second you didn't spend trying to make life what you want it to be. And you may not always be successful at making life what you want it to be. There's some things you're not going to have any control over. But I think we do have control over how we respond and react to things. And if you start by working to eliminate the unrealistic expectations that life's going to be fair without people working to make it fair, that we should be able to live forever instead of recognizing that we're going to die. I think if you start knocking down those false expectations, it becomes a lot easier to meet life where it is and address it honestly and saying, oh yeah, that completely sucks. Is there a way that I can make it suck less? And there's not always going to be any kind of easy answer, but it's the closest thing I can come up with as to, I don't suffer from fears or thoughts about death or dying. I don't get anxious or upset that the universe isn't fair or that it doesn't care about me or that things didn't work out the way I want. I just don't. And I get that I'm definitely in the weird category there, but all I can do is describe what goes through my head as to, it's one of the reasons why I get so irritated at callers who just refuse to honestly address the question, because I'm here not to shit all over Christianity. They do that fine on their own, or Judaism or Islam, or pick your religion. I'm here to either get a good reason to believe something that I don't believe, or to help someone else find out that they didn't have a good reason, so they don't have to stay in that belief. And if I'm just dealing with reality on its own terms, I find that I suffer a lot less. Less frustration. Outside of the shows where we get calls like that, I don't have a ton of frustration about life in general. I get frustrated when things aren't working the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
So we got to change how we expect things to work.
Yeah. Just take things as they come, pretty much is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's the serenity prayer of, grant me the ability to change the things I can and to know the difference, etc. I just think that's kind of pragmatically good advice across the board. I don't need to ask a God for that ability. I can just ask myself, is there something I can do about this? And if the answer is clearly no, then the next follow-up question is there something else? Do I need to spend more time on this for some other reason? And if that answer is no, it's time to fucking move on, because I got 99 problems, and that I'm going to be dead someday isn't one of them.
That is a problem that is not something you need to spend any time trying to solve, because you're not going to.
Yep. Jason, I'm gonna let you go. If you're interested, I see it listed as a theist. You want to call back in another time and actually tell us, what you believe and why you believe it, or if you still believe it or whatever else. I'm happy to do that with you, but I want to get some. I don't want you to come in and feel like, oh, they're only going to talk to me if I defend theism.
No, yeah, I'll call back some more time. You guys have a good rest of your day, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks,
Jason.
Take care.
If you'll indulge me for a minute, Matt.
Of course.
I just want to say, and it's my fault for looking at chat. I shouldn't have been looking at the chat, but I do this on every episode, and then I hurt my own feelings when I look at the chat. But I want to say this is a channel where we talk about ideas. We have conversations about people's positions and their ideas and their beliefs and their behaviors. That's the things that we are here to discuss. We're here to talk about, a person, that's the stuff. If you're going to judge someone on how they're living their life or anything, like their behaviors and their ideas and their beliefs are a good place to start. It really gets to me the way that so many people who are otherwise, seemingly thoughtful people go to appearances and these strange juvenile ad hominem places. And I'm sort of saying this on behalf of Jason, but I'm going to use myself because I don't want to talk about what everyone was saying about the last caller. But every single time I do one of these shows, there are people in the chat talking about my physical appearance and talking about how ugly I am. And it is a thing that, like, I'm always so perplexed by it. I'm like, what a strange thing to say about a stranger who you don't know. And I'm aware of what I look like. And I'm also aware that the headshot that they use for the thumbnail for the show is 5 years old and that I'm 30 pounds heavier than that photo. But people will always jump in and be like, why do they use that photo? He looks like so much worse than that photo. And I'm just like, I always just think, when people do that, because it's just not something that exists, and it doesn't even occur to me. I debate and contend with people who I am ideologically opposed to on the internet for a living. I respond to conservative people all the time who dress in ways or look ways that I could make fun of if I wanted to, or sometimes they have a speech impediment, or sometimes they misspeak. I always keep it focused on the substance of their ideas and the substance of their argument, because that's what matters. It doesn't matter what my subjective opinion of their appearance is. That couldn't be less relevant to anything. And I just find it so odd, the amount of people who are so comfortable making unsolicited comments about a person's appearance, or in the case of our last caller, who announced himself as a disabled person, talking about the way that his speaking voice sounded. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why? I got to take a second to admonish our audience here a little bit and just go, what the fuck is wrong with you? Keep it focused on the opinions that are being shared, the perspectives, the ideas, the behaviors. Almost every single time someone in my comments tells me how ugly they find me, I go to their profile and they don't have any public photos of themselves shared. And I go, oh, I wonder why that is. Could it be that you are projecting your own insecurities? I just, and also, what an irrelevant thing. Why do you feel so comfortable commenting on that? I'm aware that I'm heavier than I was 5 years ago. That tends to be how the process of entropy works on a human body. You don't need to talk about it. It couldn't be less relevant. You don't need to talk about the way a person's voice sounds. It couldn't be less relevant to the substance of the call. That's all I'm saying is here we are here to talk about behaviors and ideas and beliefs and opinions. We are not here to talk about what a person fucking looks like or sounds like. That's it.
It's never ending. And it's in part because the internet is a fucking cesspool of people with beliefs they're too cowardly to defend. And it's all about, can we get a reaction? A good chunk of the callers are just calling in just because they like to see me get pissed off and react. And, years ago when I was doing AXP and was heavier then, there'd be people that call in and be like, you're fat and bald. And I'm like, tell me something I don't fucking know. I mean, you think I literally shaved this in part because in the early days of me doing Atheist Experience, we were in the public access studio and you're working with not the best equipment, but you have these big lights. And I had incredibly thin and very, very fine hair. And so if we were just sitting here, it looked like I had a head of hair. But on TV, with the light coming down on it and the camera there, it looks like there's no hair there because, in part because of the way it's lit. Now, there was gradually less and less hair there. It's undeniable. I come from a family, but I was like, somebody said, you should probably shave that so that it doesn't look weird during the show. And I was like, okay. And I shaved it and I've been keeping it short ever since. And now I keep it short. Well, ooh, look, I'm like a hippie right now. There's stuff on the side. It's like peace and love, yo. It's starting to get up there. But yeah, it is so wild. It is the admission that you are not just not a good person, but that you have nothing substantive to offer, nothing of any value. There's a reason why we set policies of don't comment on the host looks. And it's because somebody will be in, Matt's bald and fatter, or if I don't have because I wear dentures, and if I don't have my upper teeth in, people will be like, Matt sounds funny today, or Matt looks funny today, or why is he talking like that? Or what? Sorry. That's just the way it's going to work sometime. It's wild. And it's, and to be fair, I get a little irritated when people ostensibly on our side do the same thing. Like I watch, I didn't watch for a number of times because he used to be much more in favor of Rogan, but I watch Kyle Kalinske a lot because he's helpful and he's right on so many things. And yet the other day, Emma Vigeland went on to CNN, which, yes, the day that Emma runs for office, I'll be backing her for all kinds of stuff. But Kyle not only went on, did a clip to celebrate Emma and good job, but then just sat there and mocked the looks of this other dude there. And I'm like, you don't have to call him, whatever it was, a pasty fat dipshit. He can just be a dipshit. I mean, you didn't have to go there.
Yeah, the only time that I've ever found it like even appropriate to bring up another person's appearance is when they do it first. Is when someone is the whole crux of their argument is, well, look at how this person looks. And then it's like, you want to talk about looks? Okay, you are opening that book. I'm going to go ahead and go into my roast book here and give you a taste of your own medicine, but only to drive home the point of what a stupid way to debate our ideological differences. That you're saying that it's wrong to be a liberal or a progressive because look at this liberal. Okay, look at you, motherfucker. What are we talking about? I just don't get how so many people genuinely think that is in any way a substantive or relevant argument about anything. It's just so. And I also say to people all the time, also be careful even when when you're paying someone a compliment. When sometimes people will share like old videos of me from like 5 years ago, and people in the comments will go like, Austin, have you been working out? Have you lost weight? You look great. And I'm like, guys, just don't say anything. Like you don't, what you're saying is you looked better 5 years ago than you do now. And you're trying to say it as a compliment, but like you just don't, it's just not, it doesn't, you don't need to comment on it. You just don't, even when you think you're saying something nice. I think more people just need to get used to like, there's no reason for you to comment on someone else's appearance unsolicited, you know? But when someone opens up the door for, hey, we're talking about looks now, that is a solicitation. It's like, okay, Trump wants to call someone a piggy. Okay. All right, Cankles, let's have at it. But
all right.
yeah,
we have more people calling in to talk about how and when they left Christianity. And Brent has been on hold for, I don't know, a billion years. Yeah. So Brent, they, them, it from Florida, the point when I left Christianity. Welcome. How are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Welcome to the show.
Well, tell us when you left, if you got a point. I mean, I don't mean that in the rude way of do you have a fucking point, but I mean a point in time.
Yeah. There's a little bit of background. My family was like 2 steps from like the head of Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham. Like, if you know about Dr. Gary Parker, he had a creation museum in Florida as part of ICR before he split off from before Ken Ham split off from them. And like our family, like we carried a dinosaur from the Creation Museum back to Florida to him from Buddy Davis. They're the dinosaur sculptor. Like my family was very deep in it. And like young Earth creationism and stuff like that.
And what was the thing that got you out?
So like just in the back of my head there was constant like doubt, like pushed away, shelf it, especially about science. And it kind of pissed me off. I'm very autistic, and just like getting to a stopping point, like, oh, that's just how God made it. That's it. That actually turned me off from science for a while because I got pissed off. But I was looking up stuff about abuse actually, and a video by Believe It or Not came up about how God is like an abuser, and that just kind of flipped it for me, being like, why, even if this is real, why would I want a relationship like this? And then that opened up the doors to watching Forrest Valkai and all his stuff.
Hello?
Hello?
Are you still there?
Yes. Oh,
Oh,
did it
you
cut
just
out?
kind of stopped mid-sentence, so I didn't know if we lost you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Brent, did you want to keep going?
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, I'm nervous.
Oh, it's okay.
No, it's fine. We just didn't want to, if you'd reached the end of what you were going to share, that's fine. And if you wanted to keep going, there was a long pause, and they tell me dead air is a bad thing. So
Yeah, sorry.
You're okay. Like I said it to an earlier caller. I get nervous every time I do the show. It's it's a lot of being visible and a lot of talking. So I get it.
all right. Well, we got more callers lining up. Thanks for sharing, Brent. There's a ton of different ways that people find their way out, and it's wild when, like, theists creationists are constantly trying to oppose scientific things like, evolution. And what they don't realize is we could throw every bit of the science about evolution out the window right now and just say, yeah, we don't know any of that. It's not real. It's almost, there's no reason to believe any of it. And it wouldn't move us a millimeter closer to demonstrating that creationism is the right answer. That requires its own evidence and work to do.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, Bryn. I appreciate you calling and sharing that with us. We're going to move on to a couple others. Also, announcement wise, I know I went through the schedule real quick. And that is after this show's over, there's going to be a Calling It Now, or at least that's my understanding. Is that right, Arden, that we're going to switch over to Calling It Now in 20 minutes?
Yep.
Okay. We've still got one caller on hold, and there's still a little bit of space, and we've got about 20 minutes. And then after Calling It Now is over, the Sunday show after dark, it's going to be Forrest and Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels. And hopefully they managed to get some theistic callers. And also, the individual that called in before found the old email that they sent in. And I'm going to send the link to Arden. I don't know. Well, let me get this caller in and I'll talk to Arden offline about what I'd like to potentially do. But we have Hannah calling in from New Hampshire, to pronouns of she, or to call in to discuss her moment of becoming an atheist.
Hello, I'm Matt and Austin. How are you guys?
Great. How are you? How's your Easter?
It's good. I've decided to send it home alone because I don't know, just one of those years where it's like, yeah,
Yeah. I am also by myself.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I am also by myself, but I'm also here with all of you. So,
Yay.
mm.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous. As someone with ADHD and crippling social anxiety, I decided to write everything down to keep it concise because, yeah.
Great.
So I grew up a fundamentalist evangelical Baptist, and my church and school were all the same building, the same people, and we were all firm believers in young earth creationism, which is just a great combo. A family member of mine was kicked out, and we eventually all had to leave. After my parents had a divorce, my siblings and I went to public school, and it was in high school there that I took a mythology class. And it was seeing how others viewed Christianity as a religion rather than how I was taught to believe it at the time as truth and fact of life and a relationship with, God or whatever. That was the first time I started asking questions and even wrote in a paper about my faith for the class. I sort of confided in my teacher that I think I believe because I was told to, not because I actually believe in it. And then from then on to my mid-20s, I continued to question everything and research religion, Christianity, the history of the church, and first removing myself as someone who believed in the Bible, then eventually questioning God completely when my best friend came out to me. And I just couldn't fathom someone I loved, who was one of the best people I knew, as someone destined for something like hell, for who she was and something she had no choice over. That was kind of the catalyst in all of that. But it wasn't until about 6 years ago when I went on a solo vacation up in northern New Hampshire here. And I went up to get a view from the mountains. And that's when, it really started to sink in, oh, this is all amazing. It all came from God, but what if it didn't? What if none of this did? What if he's not even real? I don't have good reason to believe that he is. I think I'm an atheist now. And since then, I've worked on learning about evolution, listening to like Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience and the Lying Gear, and just kind of working on my trauma from growing up in a religion where I was taught as a girl and as a woman that I'm born a sinner, I'll never be good enough, and working on the anger from growing up that way too. But yeah, so that's kind of my story.
Cool.
If was the realization, I'm sorry, I missed part of it. Was the realization that you never really believed, or that you did believe, but that you also would say you believed? Because I'm asking for a, kind of a specific reason. There were periods of time where I genuinely believed. And then there was a period of time where I would have professed belief, even though I don't know that that's completely accurate. It's not, how I would have, like, if in retrospect, if I went back and looked at it, I don't think that I did sincerely believe at time X. Even if you had asked me, are you a believer? I would have said yes. And at some point after that, I tried to avoid the revisionist history of saying, oh, well, I never really believed. I just professed it, which, this is what I get accused of, but I definitely believed for a good long time. So do you think there was a period where you definitely believed, and then a period where you would have said you were a believer even if you weren't really? Because I don't know, I tend to rationalize it as I don't tend to think about it that much, because I'm at that point in time, it's not like I'm debating atheists or anything.
Right. Yeah, no, I would definitely say definitely all through childhood, teen years, I was a firm believer, and I think it wasn't until that mythology class that I really started to wonder, like, I do believe, but do I believe because I was told to, or it just kind of, I think that's where just doubt really started to settle in for me. But looking back, I do know that I was a believer. But I don't know, yeah, I feel like indoctrination seems to have that kind of questioning. At least for me, it's always had that kind of wonder of, like, did I really believe? Did I not? Did I, because it's not like anyone, gave me a choice in believing growing up or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I related a lot to how high demand your experience was and how intertwined everything was from school to, I talked about that earlier in the episode, that my experience was very similar growing up. And I remember as a kid, I really do believe that I actually believed it. I think that but I remember anytime I would have the thought, what if I don't? Because I would have this thought as a kid. I'd be like, well, what if I don't actually believe it? What if I'm just afraid to say I don't? That thought would terrify me. And there would be all kinds of, like, the fear of, like, what if I don't actually think this? And I would just immediately shut that down, because I was so afraid to not believe it. I think that's sort of like the term God fearing is such an interesting term, that people proudly are like, oh, I am genuinely afraid of the wrath of God, of what would happen if I stopped claiming belief. It's interesting.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's the indoctrination of, kind of fear. That, thou shalt not question the Lord thy God. Doubt is a sin, all these things. And it encourages people to to be in this position of saying, okay, I better, because I don't know enough. I don't know as much as my preacher. I don't know as much as my parents. I definitely don't know as much as God. I don't know. There's just so much that I don't know. And rather than, which is all true, rather than encouraging people to reach the right conclusion off that, which is, I don't know enough to profess belief in this. Instead, it spins that to be, I don't know enough to be honest about not believing this. Because people mistake, I'm not convinced that God is real, with I'm absolutely certain there is no God. They do that all the time. And then it's like, well, how can you, Mr. Professing Atheist, profess to know so much when you know like less than 1% of all the things you can know? Yes, I do. I probably know a vanishingly small percent of all the things one can know. And one of the things I don't know is whether or not there's a God. But what I do know is nobody's presented a good reason for one yet. And of all the ones that have been proposed here in the earthly realm, they have failed to meet their burden of proof. If there's another God out there in the vast expanse of things I don't know, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Well,
was something I had to figure out the difference too, is believing that there isn't one, or or just not being convinced that there is. So that was a learning curve for me with learning about atheism, because that was the other thing, is growing up the way that I did, there's a very basic sense of, atheists are just, they're non-believers, they're terrible, they're this and that, and it's like, but no, there's more to it than that. And again, that's just something I had to learn as I went. And thankfully, I know it's not everyone's experience, but for me, I didn't get a lot of I wasn't afraid when I came to the conclusion. I wasn't afraid of what my life might look like without that belief. It was more of a relief. It was a burden off of my shoulders. It was the rose-colored glasses being lifted, in a sense, for me.
Yes.
Which again, I know that's not everyone's experience, but
it's in line with mine. Everything real about my life became better and more real. Not instantly, because this didn't happen in an instant. I don't even have a moment. And I appreciate the call. I've got one more thing I got to do before I wrap up here today. But thank you for sharing.
thank you so much for having me. Both of you have an awesome day.
You too,
Awesome.
Hannah. Thanks
Too.
for calling.
So that's what happens on Easter Sunday, is you get one caller who thinks that the story alone is a justification to believe the story, and who thinks that a demonstrably fraudulent piece of cloth is sufficient evidence to conclude that a resurrection occurred. And then everybody else runs and hides and doesn't bother to offer any sort of evidence for anything. However, when the callers call in and ask us questions about, hey, would you believe this if it were proven to be true? And we instantly answer yes. I'll believe anything that's been proven to be true. And so, on that note, we have a video clip that I'm going to play for me to review here live. The individual who suggested that, or was asking about me referring to melanin afflicted, and they're also saying that they found clips from long ago where I would refer to Black people as blacks. But they're not going to go through and dig all those up. That's fine. If I've ever done that, I wholeheartedly, unreservedly apologize, and I have no inclination to do anything like that again. And we'll continue to speak out and oppose it. However, this is the clip that they sent in of me saying melanin afflicted. And so I think we're going to play it and assume we can hear it, and I'll react to it. So go ahead.
Hold on, I tried to hit play and it didn't give me audio, so one sec. Try this again.
I can, and people will say, oh, well, you just have to take it on faith.
Well, what that means to me, when somebody says you have to take it on faith, there is no position that you couldn't accept on faith. I could take it on faith that men are smarter than women. I could take it on faith that men are, nicer than women. I could take it on faith that white people are better than any other, pigment and melanin afflicted individuals. I could take it on faith that atheists are 10 times smarter than anybody of any religion. And if there's no way to falsify those claims, then I can sit here comfortably in my bigoted, ignorant, and probably false delusions about all of those things. And so that's why we need to find a way to make sure that we are believing things not only for which there seems to be evidence, but for which they are potentially falsifiable, and that falsification has not occurred despite attempts.
Okay. So I definitely said melanin afflicted there. And I don't think that it's fair to say that's sarcasm, although I can tell you to the best of my ability what was going on. And that is, the conversation was about taking things on faith, and my brain is trying to come up with absurd examples and bigoted examples specifically so that I can point out you can use faith to justify bigotry, which is why I talked about bigotry later. My internal thesaurus decided to use the word afflicted. There's no way that I am in any way was I ever intending to suggest that it's an actual affliction. However, the language was incredibly sloppy, and for people who are just tuning in and don't know me or don't know my views on things, and maybe even for some people who do, if they missed that I was building to something where I was trying to point out bigotry as something you can justify with faith, then again, thoroughly apologize for that as well. I will leave it up to the producers of the line to determine if that's a clip that is egregious enough to be taken down. I'm not convinced that it is, and I would think that the clarification and apology would work well. But yeah, it's worth pointing stuff out like this, because it could be that I was letting my own bigotry through instead of showing off how to justify bigotry with faith. But in any case, it was sloppy enough that at least one person heard it and went, wait, what did he say? Why would he say it that way? And I regret that it caused them specifically that reaction. And I will do my best to be clear in the past, but no, melanin is not an affliction, and neither is a lack of melanin. This is about, I can justify anything I want by appealing to faith instead of evidence.
I really respect your willingness to play that clip live on air and respond to it, and take the caller on good faith. And but I heard it that way too, just hearing it for the first time, that it was like, oh, you are giving examples of bad positions that a person might put to you. Men are smarter than women inherently. White people are inherently smarter and better than, and you're trying to use the language of whatever this person, but it's like, it's maybe just an incomplete thought that you're assuming the listener is following you on the thread, but without knowing exactly what you mean, you can see how someone would go, oh, what's with that term? But it's you're clearly not stating positions that you actually believe or agree with. You're trying to give examples of bad positions that you might be asked to accept on faith. Yeah.
But I get that the language is going to hit different for different people. And, also it's a short. And so you're going to see a lot more stuff like this, because first of all, I've done live TV for 20 years. I'm sure the number of times I have slipped and said something that wasn't what I intended. I guarantee you there's something that I got like the exact opposite of what I intended within the last 3 shows. I mean, this just is what happens when you talk as much as I fucking talk. However, it's sometimes things are going to get lost contextually in a short. And it may be that while, I wasn't thinking about that at all, there are specific words that are going to, they're going to make some people's ears perk up more than others and direct them to think about things in a certain way. And so it's at a minimum, thanks to the caller for sending that in or potentially calling me out. We will continue to try to do better. And no, I don't think it's an affliction. No, I don't think that blacks is the current, or was ever maybe, a viable, good way to refer to black people.
I think if I can add one thing before we wrap up,
Yep.
I'm just seeing a lot of people in the comments who are saying like, "Oh, Matt, you don't need to apologize for that." And like, listen, I definitely don't want to set a precedent of us always responding to every criticism like this live on air in this fashion, but it's okay. Like Matt said, these shows are live 6 days a week minimum, sometimes more, for 3 hours on average per show. We're gonna say some stuff wrong. Like, you don't have to defend us that we're always right at every single turn all the time, always. Sometimes we get stuff wrong, and it's okay. That's part of being a good skeptic. So
Yep. I addressed it because he sent me the clip. We had a fun Sunday where all the theists, all the resurrection believers were so busy avoiding any demonstration of the resurrection that I figured at a minimum, if somebody thinks I'm being racially insensitive, I should apologize. Whether my perception of it and your perception of it don't matter as much as the fact that somebody was bothered. But yes, we are not going to have a regular segment on the shows where you think you can call in and challenge it. Just send an email. We'll look it over. This is how I would have done it privately if I'd ever seen the email. On that note, thank you everybody for tuning in to the Sunday show. Remember, there's another Sunday show after dark coming up at 7 p.m. Central. And right now you're going to get converted all automatically over to Calling It Now with Jimmy Snow. And I don't know who's on with Jimmy.
Javon Bradley is who's scheduled, although he was really sick the last few days. So whether he's there, I don't know. But that is not my problem.
I hope it's
That is
Javon, and I hope he
Jimmy's
throws
problem.
up. Patreon.com/calltheline.